Take their seats and we will get started with the meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Affordability and Utilities for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026. I'd like to ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. And please, Minister, introduce your officials and yourself when it comes to your turn there. So my name is Garth Roseau, MLA for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright, and carry on.
Nolan Dick, MLA for Grand Prairie.
Good evening, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA Calgary East.
Scott Sear, MLA Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul. Oh, don't touch anything.
Jason Steffen, MLA Red Deer South.
Nathan Neudorf, MLA for Lethbridge East, Minister of Affordability and Utilities. With me at the table, Andrew Buffin, Brian Doyle, David James, and Neil Jelland.
Sharif Haji, MLA for the incredible Edmonton Decor.
Najwan Al-Junaid, the MLA for Calgary Glenmore.
Marlon Schmidt, Edmonton Gold Bar.
Janice Irwin, Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Kyle Kozowski, MLA for Sherwood Park, a territory that is serviced by Fortis, ATCO, and Aero Utilities.
That's why you're here. Okay. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Mr. Sear for Mr. Dick, Member Irwin for Member Calahoo Stonehouse, Mr. Singh for Honorable Ms. Armstrong-Humanick, Mr. Steffen for Mr. Porchenko, and Mr. Kosowski for Ms. Sweet as acting deputy chair. Few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of the meeting can be accessed by the Legislative Assembly website. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honorable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Affordability and Utilities shall be considered for 3 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for considerations of the main estimates in legislative policy committees. Suborder 59.01 sub 6 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been provided to the ministry officials at the table. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both the minister and the member speaking agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry of estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the main estimate schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please email the message to the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break? Okay. Ministry officials who are present may, at the discretion of the minister, address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to a microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes and other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery are not to approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written materials provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have an opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during the estimate debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. I would like to now invite the Minister of Affordability and Utilities to begin with your opening remarks. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I see by the clock that we have 175 minutes left to go. So I'm pleased to be here to present to you the highlights from Budget 2025 for the Ministry of Affordability and Utilities. While I've already introduced them, joining me today are David James, my Deputy Minister, Andrew Buffin, Assistant Deputy Minister of Utilities, Brian Doyle, Assistant Deputy Minister of Corporate Services and Senior Financial Officer, and Neil Jelland, Assistant Deputy Minister of Affordability. To provide context for these estimates, I will begin with a brief overview of the department and its priorities heading into the 25-26 fiscal year. Affordability and Utilities has three main areas of focus: leading the government's ongoing efforts to keep life affordable for Albertans, managing and developing policy and programming for the province's electricity and natural gas systems, including rural utilities, and overseeing the work of the Utilities Consumer Advocate in educating and supporting electricity and natural gas consumers. On the affordability side, this includes working across ministries to provide support to those who need it most, as well as lowering costs for all Albertans on everyday essentials so they can keep more of their hard-earned dollars and use them when and where they are needed most for their family. On the utility side, this includes developing policy and legislative frameworks and administrating programs to ensure Albertans have access to affordable, reliable electricity and natural gas. In the fall of 2024, the ministry also assumed responsibility for developing and implementing legislative, regulatory, and policy frameworks for nuclear energy. The ministry's organizational structure also includes 5 arm's-length ABCs. 4 of these play important roles in the generation and oversight of Alberta's electricity market, electricity and natural gas systems, and retail. These are the Alberta Utilities Commission, or AUC, the Balancing Pool, the Market Surveillance Administrator, or MSA, and the Alberta Electric Systems Operator, the ISO. The 5th, the Power and Natural Gas Consumers Panel, provides guidance and advice on utilities issues affecting farms, residential, and small business consumers. The ministry's mandate is incredibly important. Through our work, we are helping maintain the Alberta advantage and making sure our province remains the best place to raise a family or start a business. We are addressing the rising cost of living to preserve the high quality of life enjoyed by people in Alberta. This includes driving down electricity prices and protecting consumers from unexpected spikes on their utility bills. Budget 2025 supports this and will continue to build on our successes by keeping more money in Albertans' pockets and advancing a modern utility system that meets the needs of all Albertans, as well as attract investment and support job creation. The ministry's expense budget for the upcoming fiscal year is $168.2 million, which represents an 83% increase from last year. This is due almost entirely to the forecast expenses related to the Renewable Electricity Program, or the REP. Since the program was not accepted while the program has not accepted any generation facilities since 2019, a series of 20-year term agreements were signed by the former NDP government under this program. While this was a clear win for Albertans on affordability, sorry, I missed a page. Some of these agreements stretch out to 2042. At $82.1 million, the REP expenses make up nearly 50% of the ministry's budget. In contrast, REP expenses were only $12.4 million in budget 2024. There are 8 generation facilities under the REP, and each company has a contract that guarantees them a contracted strike price. The way the program is structured, it only generates revenue when power prices are higher than the contracted strike price. If the wholesale price exceeds the contract strike price, the company pays the government the difference. However, when the wholesale price is below the contract strike price, the government must pay that difference. Our government has been working hard to bring down electricity prices, and over the last year, we have succeeded. And while this is a clear win for Albertans on affordability, the decrease in electricity prices means taxpayers will shoulder the costs of this policy for the foreseeable future. The ministry's remaining expenses for budget 2025 total $86.1 million. This includes $35.1 million for the 25-26 operations of the Alberta Utilities Commission to regulate the province's utility market. This is up $800,000 from budget 2024, the amount of which was $34.3 million. Next budget 2025 includes $13.6 million of non-cash accretion expense arising from the financial obligations of the coal phase-out agreements. This expense is down from budget 2024 amount of $16.6 million. Budget 2025 also includes $13.2 million in operating funding for the Utilities Consumer Advocate, the UCA, to provide consumer education and advocacy for Albertans, farmers, and small businesses. A total of $5 million of that supports outreach and education for Albertans enrolled on the rate of last resort to encourage them to explore their options to help lower their electricity bills. In addition, Budget 25 continues to include grant funding to address specific affordability and utilities challenges in remote and rural communities. We are providing $6.4 million for the Rural Utilities Grant Program to bolster rural utility infrastructure and advance local economic development. The grants help provide affordable utilities in rural communities, ensuring critical services are accessible and reasonably priced when and where they're needed. Next, $500,000 is allocated to the Rural Water Program to provide rural Albertans with safe, reliable, and modern water treatment and distribution systems. Finally, $1.6 million is for the Remote Area Heating Allowance Program, which helps with the high cost of heating fuel when Albertans are unable to access our natural gas system. Now turning to revenue, we estimate that it will be $105.9 million for budget 2025. This includes $57 million net income from the balancing pool, $34 million from industry levies and licenses, $600,000 in fines collected by the Market Surveillance Administrator, and $400,000 from investment income. $13.2 million will also be collected from the balancing pool, funding the entire operating budget for the Utilities Consumer Advocate. The UCA operates on a credit recovery basis. Its funding is collected from the balancing pool and 2 natural gas distributors. This includes the ministry's major budget items for major budget 24 items. We have laid out our business plan, and the next 3 years will be critical for the ministry and our mandate. Going into 2025-26, affordability remains top of mind for many Albertans. World events once again have brought the risk of inflation and disruption to our doorstep. Our government is looking to meet these challenges through Budget 25, to empower Albertans to make the best financial decisions for them and their families during a time of uncertainty. Our government is moving forward with cuts to personal income taxes. Albertans and Alberta's businesses pay the lowest taxes overall in the country with no sales tax, and this will help them keep even more of their hard-earned dollars. My ministry is also continuing to work across government to build on supports already in place, including housing, insurance, and utilities, to address cost of living challenges. In the coming year, the ministry will also be taking next steps in modernizing our electricity system, putting Albertans first and ensuring that affordability, reliability, and sustainability of our power grid now and for generations to come. This includes long-term reforms to Alberta's power market and updated transmission policies to protect ratepayers from rising fees. We will also continue to explore the potential of nuclear, geothermal, and other technologies that can benefit the electricity system. Additionally, we are listening to Albertans and are looking at ways to lower costs on every aspect of their power bill, including distribution costs. In closing, I want to emphasize that affordability and utilities is a small but mighty ministry, and we have achieved a great deal in our 2.5 years as a standalone ministry, with one of the smallest budgets in all of government. We've rolled up our sleeves to tackle key issues, and we will continue to do so. Our Budget 2025 estimates strike a balance between funding what is required to deliver on key objectives and mandate items, and the need for fiscal restraint during these uncertain times. Thank you very much, Chair, and I look forward to the discussion to follow.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 60 minutes, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. Honorable members, you will be able to see a timer for the speaking block both in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Who is the first question asked, or on the who's going to ask the questions first? Member Haji, would you like to share time?
Share time?
Like to share time, yes. Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
so given that there'll be 20-minute blocks, and no one gets to speak for more than 10 minutes at a stretch. So carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the Minister, the department team. Thanks to the department team for the work that you have put into it, not only in preparation for the estimates, but the overall contribution to the budget development processes. I'll start with the Ministry's mandate, and page 13 of the business plan articulates the Ministry's mandate as responsible for leading and coordinating the government of Alberta's efforts to address affordability and the rising cost of living. This includes collaborating with partner ministries to provide guidance and information on essential expenses such as utilities, housing, insurance, food, and other household costs. So based on this mandate, my understanding is that the ministry plays a key role in the coordination efforts on affordability initiatives across the various sectors of the government. However, rent remains in Alberta increasing at the fastest rate in the country. Auto insurance remains the highest nationwide, and according to the recent report, Alberta pay the most for utilities, forcing many families into difficult financial situations. With nearly 60% of Albertans reporting that the standard of living has fallen in the past 2 years, and the ministry's responsibility is to lead coordinated efforts to tackle affordability. Working class Albertans are particularly concerned, with 93% worried they will never achieve a middle class standard of living due to the rising cost of living. In alignment with Objective 1.1 of the business plan, through the chair, can the minister clarify and elaborate the ministry's strategy to addressing the affordability crisis that Albertans are currently facing?
Thank you very much for the questions. Yes, I do collaborate with other ministries on that. In other ministries' mandate letters, you will have heard that other ministries often lead certain portions of those conversations. Rental and housing issues is led by the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, and we provide a supporting role with that ministry. Our ministry department working very closely with theirs. And we're very proud of the efforts that they put forward for affordable housing, as well as what they've done to help stimulate the economy. And we see the greatest number of housing starts where supply will outstrip demand, or at least help alleviate some of that demand, seeing rental prices decrease. With insurance, I work with the Ministry of Finance and Treasury Board. He takes the lead on insurance, so we provide a supporting role to that ministry as well. And we look forward to the transition to the new Care First model of insurance that will help put up to $400 back in each family's insurance. So we look forward to seeing the implementation. It does take some time to see these things come into fully being implemented and being made available to Albertans, but we took the time to do the work, and I look forward to that becoming a reality. In terms of utilities, what we've been doing and undertaking in our ministry thus far is we have looked at every single aspect of our energy-only market. There are four, for the benefit of the committee, 4 sections to our market. There's generation, there's transmission, there's distribution, and then there's retail costs. To date, we've addressed 3 of those fulsomely. On the retail, we've switched from the regulated rate option, which was a misleading name, and all industry participants agreed that it was misleading because people thought the regulated word actually provided a measure of stability, which it didn't. So changing the name was to create attention so that people would become more informed and educated on the type of rate they're on. And beyond that, we stabilized the rate of last resort into one that has now a 2-year time frame instead of a 3-month purchasing time frame, making it more stable. It was never intended to be the lowest price option. It was intended to be a less volatile, stable price option with price protection now up to 2 years for those with no other thing.
Yeah, I'll come back to those specifics in terms of affordability. But my first question is from a mandate perspective. I do understand that line ministries do their part, but how is your ministry, how is the ministry coordinating these affordability measures in a coordinated manner where Albertans can see what the government is doing, and what benchmarks are you using to measure if your ministry is meeting its mandate in terms of coordinating the efforts that the government is making on affordability?
Certainly, I appreciate that. So I was trying to provide some context. So in addition to meeting with the individual ministries and the work that they're doing, especially when they lead it, the Premier has also put in my mandate that I am Vice Chair of Treasury Board, where we see the culmination of those financial decisions coming to bear. Those costs and line items aren't in our budget finances. They would reside in those other ministries who are lead. But in a coordinated effort with the Minister of Finance and all the other ministers as they come to Treasury Board to present their objectives and reach their mandates, we are fulfilling our mandate by supporting them and their priorities. And that's how we balance the priorities that they bring forward in an ordered and measured way, and the Treasury Board's requirement to work on a financial stable budget. I'll also ask if my Deputy Minister would like to make some additional comments on how he, through the department, would engage other ministries. But some of the benchmarks and how we achieve our mandates are we track inflation values of different consumer baskets. And I think we have somewhere here our dashboard, our affordability dashboard. So after my DM speaks a little bit, I will ask my ADM, Neil Jellin, to talk a little bit about the affordability dashboard that we provide for Albertans on the Government of Alberta websites.
Yeah, thanks very much, Minister. So a few things that we've been working on, supporting what the Minister was saying. A large one this year was actually working with Treasury Board and Finance, where they were actually looking at inflation car insurance and all the costs associated with that. The work that was going on. We have an Affordability Advice for Life webpage that went up in April of last year, and we've been continuing to support that. Also working with Ministry Seniors Community Social Services, watching what they're doing with respect to housing. Obviously, they have the primary responsibility, but as part of the broader affordability housing strategy, we're working with them. We're also working with our colleagues in Red Tape, Service Alberta Red Tape Reduction, Intergovernmental Relations, and Executive Council around what's happening centrally across government. So they have responsibility as essential agencies for that work, and so we sit on various groups with them around what's happening more broadly.
Yeah, I get in terms of having been worked in different departments. I get in terms of working with different departments is one of the key competencies of all across public servants. But my question is that specifically, as if you say that the ministry is leading the coordination on affordability across government departments, that is absolutely a different role. So I want to understand how Albertans will see, and it will be reported in terms of seeing that the efforts that the ministry is doing from a mandate perspective on the coordination on affordability.
Certainly. So again, I'll provide a short comment and then I'll go to my ADM. So in terms of leading that at every cabinet decision and Treasury Board, it is our objective to, on items brought forward, to consider the lens on how this would potentially impact affordability and what affordability means to Albertans. So there's plentiful discussion around those tables about how this would impact different Albertans in different ways, what demographic they might be from, what region of the province they might be from. And one of the reasons we chose to address electricity first and foremost is because it's such a primary input cost for virtually everything we purchase nowadays. 100 years ago, if you didn't have water, you didn't have a business or a community. Today, if you don't have electricity, you don't have a business or a community. Electricity is a primary need and essential to the way of life that we currently enjoy, and making sure that we stabilize that market so that grocery stores can provide a more stabilized pricing mechanism to individuals everywhere is a major and primary need within life. How we represent that is what I'd like my ADM to talk about, the affordability dashboard, which is a function representing the work all ministries of government do, and as a tool for Albertans, should they choose to look at it, help them make life decisions and see the impacts of those decisions on their daily life.
Yeah, certainly there's a few things that I can mention there. As the minister mentions, we provide information regularly to our peers as well as to the minister and others regarding what inflationary measures we're seeing in different baskets of goods, whether that's headline inflation, food inflation, those sorts of things. So it's providing that information. But more specifically to your question, I believe, we are invited into various conversations where ministries are contemplating policy discussions, whatever it happens to be. I'll use auto insurance as an example. The Ministry of Treasury Board and Finance, as an example, may have a specific focus that they're dealing with because they're dealing with auto insurance on a regular basis. Members of our team, when we're in those meetings, are speaking on behalf of the affordability consequences of different activities. So if your question is how could we show that broadly to Albertans, it's less of an overt outward-looking activity.
Yeah, basically, my simple question is that is there an affordability framework or a strategy that exists within the ministry? It's like I get it once you are asked, you like an expert ministry around the area that you provide a feedback, but does your ministry have any proactive framework that helps other departments and coordinate in terms of addressing affordability?
Yeah, other than making sure that's a decision item and it's a perspective, which it is all encompassing within the mandate and our business plan, it's to make sure that in every decision that we make, we have considered affordability. One of the other ministries that would have a similar mandate would be Red Tape Reduction and Service Alberta, where they would look at every piece of legislation or regulation that comes forward from a lens of, does this add or decrease red tape within those processes? And it's a lens of conversation rather than a stipulated checklist, because it can vary from ministry to ministries in likewise manner. For affordability, we want to make sure that it's a part of every discussion and a part of every decision without being able to spell it out on exactly what that would look like for every ministry, because it would vary from ministry to ministry. I don't know, DM, did you want to add a comment to that?
That's good news.
So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. Well, thank you. So the average growth of one of the key issues that is impacting Albertans is shrinking purchasing power. And the average growth of weekly earnings since May 2023 is 3.9 in Alberta, while the nationally the growth is 6.7. 25% of those who are showing up food banks are working Albertans, which demonstrates that the challenge that they have in terms of the amount they make and how it's not sufficient for living. So 10 years ago, wages in Alberta was 17% higher than the Canadian average. According to economist Jim Sanford's study, real wages in the province have since fallen by 10%. The minimum wage has been frozen at $15 an hour since 2018, while the average minimum wage across Canada has grown by 27%. So through the chair, what coordinated strategy does the ministry lead to address this shrinking purchasing power and the fact that Alberta now has some of the lowest paid workers in the country?
Well, I'll say most of this is not part of our mandate and resides in other ministries like Jobs, Economy and Trade. We would make the comment that it is expected that if you have the highest wages in the country, which we do in Alberta, that of course it would be the lowest in wage increasing, because everybody would be trying to catch Alberta, where Alberta would be trying to stabilize and maintain its position, but not get so far ahead that we compound other problems within Alberta. Inflation has been a challenge for every province within Canada, and we would link that directly to federal government spending through the pandemic, as well as their continued increases to the carbon tax, which is a tax on a tax on a tax. We see hundreds of millions of dollars recycled through the carbon tax through our school divisions, through our post-secondaries, and all of our public services, paying that carbon tax, which is tax dollars being taxed again and then sent to Ottawa. So while they may be rebated in other places, they're not coming back to those institutions, just driving further up that cost and purchasing power. So some of in terms of minimum wage and wage growth, that would reside in another ministry, and it's not anywhere in our business case or plan to partake in that. We've not been asked to do that, so that's not been our primary focus.
Yeah, so the struggle that I will have is, Mr. Chair, is around like how would you be able to deliver the ministry mandate? How does the ministry's mandate deliver it if the Albertans are struggling, the purchasing power is going down, minimum wage has been frozen, benchmarks show that we are behind than other provinces, or if you compare us with the national numbers, we are falling behind. So from a coordination perspective on affordability, how does the ministry tackle on that?
Well, I would say that while it is related to affordability, that is not affordability. Affordability is the cost of goods, where you're talking about earning power and productivity, which again resides in other ministries, and we leave them to do their work. We have endeavored to lower the cost of everything that people purchase by addressing their utilities, because it is, like I said earlier, a primary input cost, whether you're buying groceries or food or gas or basically any commodity. that uses electricity in any of their business activities. And that's where we are impacting affordability. Beyond that, where we have really supported Minister of Finance, particularly, is the income tax cut, which is putting money back in the pockets of every single Albertan, $750 per person, $1,500 for the average couple. And keeping those taxes low is allowing those dollars to stay with individuals in the first place, and that's been a constant effort. I'm very happy that that also resides in Budget 2025, though that's not in this ministry's budget. It is in the Ministry of Treasury, Board and Finance.
Yeah, I'll come back to the tax strategy as a way of addressing affordability on some questions, but we'll remain a little bit on the minimum wage. While minimum wage falls under the purview of the Ministry of Jobs and Economy, as you just mentioned, considering the ministry's coordination role in affordability and its objective 1.1 of the business plan, what is the government's plan regarding minimum wage policies? Has there been any conversation during the budget processes?
There has been conversation about it, but again, you'd have to talk to the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade. That's his purview. He's leading that conversation. And while I've contributed to it, that's the responsibility that we share in this ministry at this time.
Okay, thank you. Given that the department is called for affordability and utilities, can the minister explain why there is no initiatives in the budget to address wage stagnation when Albertans are earning less in real terms while paying more on housing and utilities, and basically why there is nothing in the business plan or in the fiscal plan under the ministry?
Again, as I said before, I think that wage growth would be in a productivity and an earnings topic, not an affordability. Affordability is the cost of goods. So I believe that was the intent of the Premier. She developed mandates and letters to different ministries, and that's been my understanding as well. It's not that our government isn't taking that responsibility very seriously, it just doesn't reside in this ministry. So you'd have to ask either the Premier or Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade.
So that does the department consider purchasing power has an impact on affordability, and as a policy-wise, it will have an implications on people's ability to meet ends meet?
Yes, we would.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking. Even if it sits on a different ministry, that it has an implication on affordability.
Certainly it does, but we're not the lead, and it's not in any of our business case. So like I said, our government does take that as a very serious item, and it takes a responsibility and has placed it with JET. So as much as I may feel passionate about it one way or the other, it is not in my business plan, it's not in my mandate, and while it's a very important element, again, I would say it's on productivity and wage growth, which is earning income. Affordability is, and the price of utilities, which we have been managed to take care, is on the cost of goods. That's been our focus. So.
Okay, let's talk about the tax saving versus cost of living. So the government promoted its new personal income tax bracket of 8% on the income up to $60,000 as a solution to the affordability challenges. However, when examining the real impact, many Albertans will see minimal benefit. For example, let's use a woman that lives in Lethbridge East, a single mom who lives in Lethbridge East, earning an average of income of $36,000, which is the average income of a woman in Lethbridge East, according to the data. It will save $283 per year. And when I calculated that on a daily basis, it will come to 78 cents. Meanwhile, the government has introduced increased fees to offset these modest savings. So does, through the chair,
Point of order has been called.
Point of order, order 23B. The member opposite is asking a line of question as well as the scope of this committee. We are on business plans, fiscal plan, as well as estimates for affordability and utilities. The member opposite is talking about finance, which is what we talked about this afternoon in a different committee. And so I would encourage maybe a different line of questioning, but I do believe this is a point of order based upon this. These are not in the any of the documents here to discuss today.
It's not a point of order. I appreciate the member attempting, but the member from Edmonton Decor is asking probing questions about the ministry, which is exactly the point of budget estimates. And I think he's doing a really good job of connecting issues around affordability. So I'd like the member to continue. Thank you.
What I will say, I think the minister has answered the questions a number of times that a line of your questions aren't really in his ministry. So, you know, I'd like you to attach it to like on the business plan, but relative to the, when he says it's not in his ministry, I'd ask you to accept that and then move to another question. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What makes a bit different with the minister's role and mandate is to coordinate, meaning that it touches all the ministers. So while it's not the minister's direct delivery, and it has a line ministry that delivers such programs, the ministry has a mandate around coordinating on affordability with other departments. So my questions are all around coordination aspect of it. To the question that I'm referring to is the minister talks about the tax saving. So I'm using an example of the average income of a woman in Lethbridge East that makes $36,000 will save basically 78 cents per day. So through the chair, can the minister explain how this plan, which saves cents for Albertans, will meaningfully help on the affordability challenges?
Well, I understand what you're trying to get at and how you're trying to frame things, but you didn't talk about the basic personal exemption, which also Alberta income tax has the highest in all of Canada. So they're saving a huge amount before they have to start paying taxes. So they're still paying the least amount of taxes of anybody earning that wage in all of Canada. I'm very proud of that. If you want more details, you'll have to ask the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board in whose ministry that resides. Because as I read my key objectives 1.1, it's been related to utilities, which we were talking about, housing, which some of it I have spoken to, but mostly resides in the Minister of Seniors Community Social Services, insurance, which resides in Treasury Board Finance, food, which doesn't fall in any one ministry because that's typically a federal item, but I've talked about how utilities relate to food, and other household expenses, which is basically the cost of goods sold, which is why I've kept it there. It doesn't say anything about labor and wages. So while I coordinate and lead on these items, that one's not one of the ones listed in there. But I do appreciate the question. And I think, again, a reduction in taxes, particularly for those in the lowest income, is got to be seen as beneficial, whether it's termed as $280 a year or 78 cents a day. It's still a reduction in what they cost, and every little bit counts, particularly if you have lower income. Those small items really, really matter, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah, I understand, but the question is we're talking about affordability. We're asking questions on behalf of Albertans. The question is how less than $1 a day will address the affordability crisis when we are seeing numbers of reports showing that Albertans are struggling. So that is basically what I'm asking. How will the saving, okay, let's use the $2 a day. How will the saving that amounts to $2 a day for some Albertans help address cost of living then?
I think every little bit counts. That's what we've heard from Albertans, and they were very excited, the ones I talked to, about getting the income tax cut, because every single one, while it's in place, is going to manage to save them dollars. Now, $750 can mean a whole lot to depending who you talk to, and yes, it might be over time, but it's year after year after year after year. And it's a lasting tax saving, and I think that's something to be celebrated, not derided. It's also why we are very proud of having the lowest provincial sales tax, and it is one piece of many for affordability throughout all the ministries that we're working on. And back to the average cost of electricity, the ISO has recent documentation that says that in January 2025, the average cost of wholesale power is just over $30, where in 2024 is $152. We've really seen that stabilized, and on average, it's down by 53%. So all of these things together definitely help affordability. If we could wave a magic wand and fix everybody's costs, if money grew on trees, that would be wonderful. And I think it was our Minister of Finance that said, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, but that's not the case. And sometimes we have to work at it one step at a time.
Well, thank you. Since we were made aware of the threat of tariffs from President Trump prior to this budget through the chair, how has the minister planned ahead to accommodate how tariffs will impact on cost of living? And what is the plan to help Albertans, primarily low-income Albertans who will be disproportionately impacted?
Yeah, that's a very good question, one that we are very concerned with. Trying to find out exactly what the intent of the federal U.S. government is, where tariffs will land, what rate they will be at, and how that will impact through our ministry. It has been, as you know, a very challenging and moving target. Alberta doesn't export or import a lot of electricity when compared to neighboring provinces like British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, or Quebec. It's a very small number. What it does relate to is the entire emphasis of our ministry on our electricity system is to develop reliability. It is why we did what we did with the rate of last resort to coming off of the regulated rate option, was to provide stability. Because what we found during the volatile pricings of 2023, especially for those who are lowest income, a rapid change in their utility bills makes it very, very difficult for them to keep up with their bills. If your household average bill for your utilities was 1 month $150 and the next month went up to over $600 or 4 times that amount, it makes it very difficult for them to sustain a stabilized budget, and something is not getting paid. So going to the rate of last resort provide them a 2-year stability rather than a 3-month purchasing where every month they could literally see that price change dramatically. And this has had a very stabilizing effect. Throughout the market reform work that we are continuing to do is also meant to be stabilizing and a focus on reliability. One of the contentions I know has been on our focus on renewables, but the fact of the matter is that renewables, both wind and solar, are intermittent. And in the growth of our private energy-only market, we did not see a balanced generation mix coming to Alberta at the same time. We saw a massive influx of renewables seeking huge amounts of price volatility and generation intermittency. So the work that we're doing is to put reliability back into our system, and through the market allow the response to be more balanced in generation mix. And with that, we will also see a stabilization of pricing. So that's the focus of that, and that's how we believe we can help all Albertans, whether they be large business, small business, personal, or low income, a stabilization of their utility bills, how that relates to their purchasing power for food or clothing or any other commodity is hugely significant, as it has a major knock-on effect. And that's where the emphasis of our work and our ministry has been.
Okay, and well, thanks, Minister. Through the chair, again, it's not a question directly to a different ministry, but I'm asking a question from a coordination perspective. Through the chair, can the minister explain how the department is playing a role of coordination in terms of addressing the 15% increase in rent prices that's putting intense pressure on Alberta's families?
So again, in coordination with the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, who's lead on this file, their objective has been to increase the housing supply, which will have the most natural market impact on decreasing rent. If you have 100 houses and 200 families, there will be an increase of rent prices as they have a huge market to pick from. And there'll be many people without finding a place. If you have 250 houses for 200 families, then there's an abundance to choose from, and those rental prices will come down. I believe that's where our ministry has worked closely with Seniors, Community and Social Services. Our government's policy has been consistent. We have chosen to set the conditions and allow the market to respond so that houses get built. At the end of the day, that is the only long-term solution, is that new houses continue to get built for those who are moving to Alberta in large numbers to be able to find the accommodations they and their families need.
Thank you. Earlier you mentioned and you talked about the inflation. We do recognize that inflation has been up in Alberta, and a couple of months from Stat Canada reports, Alberta has been leading in terms of inflation and the rest of the country. So given that inflation continues to impact Albertans more severely than other provinces, through the chair, can the minister explain why there are no new emergency support programs in the budget for low-income Albertans who simply cannot make ends meet?
I don't actually have all the details on other ministries and what they may have done to address that. I will note that inflation prices for electricity have come significantly down from where they were. And of all the inflationary factors across Alberta, electricity and utilities continues to be amongst the lowest of all of them. We do still have our natural gas rebate program in place should the price of natural gas go up. We have some rural utility grant programs to support those who live in northern and rural Alberta. Those are still in place. The average cost for electricity is down 53% year over year from last year, so generation is down. Now we're tackling the much more difficult aspects of our electricity market, which is transmission and distribution. As those are capital infrastructure, there are billions of dollars of projects that have been built and financed over 30 to 60 years, and much more difficult to remove from people's bills because they were built into our energy only and zero congestion policies, which we have since changed so that we can actually manage those costs into the future and build on a more strategic plan to support both generation and load. Load is individuals or businesses taking electricity off the grid, and those need to be balanced. If you don't do that, then you have industry building and putting forth projects that suit them and their return on investment objectives, and you don't get a comprehensive, well-built, balanced system. And that's why we felt that the focus of our ministry has really been around two words: reliability in terms of the generation and electricity market, and responsibility, so that developers and participants in our market share the cost of responsibility so that Albertans actually get what they pay for. And that's how we've been trying to work on those fronts.
Yeah, I really want to come back for the utility aspect of the department. I wanted to focus more on the affordability side. Through the chair, what specific programs or interventions is the ministry implementing, of course, in coordination with other ministers, to help seniors on a fixed income to manage the essential expenses, specifically when inflation is high?
Again, that would be for the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services in his budget items. I know we've talked about a number of programs, but he knows his programs. I know ours, and ours are rural utilities and gas and natural gas rebate programs, and those are the programs that fall within our ministry, and that's why they're included in our budget.
Okay, given that women are experiencing higher levels of financial anxiety than men according to recent polls, and again through the chair, what gender-specific approaches is the ministry considering to address disparities when it comes on affordability and its implications?
Again, I would direct you to the Minister of the Status of Women and Culture. I think she would have some of those supports within her ministry. If not, again, it would be in Seniors, Community and Social Services. You'd have to ask them for specific programs. That's where they reside. In terms of our work, again, utilities are a basic and essential need for Albertans, no matter who they are, where they live, what ethnicity, gender, or demographic they are. And that's why we continue to work on the utilities basis to support Albertans in every way, from food and clothing and other purchases, by helping make sure that their utility prices are A, affordable, and B, stable. And that's where our objectives lie.
Yeah, I will assume as the lead department around affordability that you'll be working with the ministry that is responsible around issues of women. Has there been any conversations throughout the budget process around that?
I'm just wondering where is that in the budget plan for this ministry? I see no relevance. 23B and C.
Yeah, you need to reference the standing orders. It's definitely not a point of order under 23B. The member has been actually quite diligent in referring to budget ministry documents, and I would prefer that folks don't waste his time with frivolous points of order. Thank you, Chair.
You know, I've noticed you're talking in general terms. I'd like you to get more specific on the item relative to what this ministry can answer. So if you could focus on that, that'd be good.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be referencing straight to the first paragraph of the mandate, which is under Objective 1.1. If you read that, the Ministry's mandate stipulates that the coordination of departments or government efforts to address affordability. So when it comes to women, my assumption will be, based on reading from the mandate, that the Ministry's responsibility is to work with the Ministry of Status of Women and look into issues that are impacting on affordability when it comes to women.
Okay. Yeah, I just correct me if I'm wrong, Minister. So what you're saying is you don't dictate those policies relative to women, right?
That is correct, Chair.
So what he's looking for is, as best as I can understand it, is what role in coordination do you play? So they have something that's relative to women. What do you do specifically? And if you don't, then just say that and then we'd move on. Okay.
So again, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Member. Lead in coordination, but it is quantified further down to utilities, housing, insurance, food, and other essential household expensive, not every item. So we do not have a ministry-to-ministry conversation on women and gender issues. That's not part of the mandate. It's not included. However, I will say that we have held quite a number of affordability roundtables around the province and have invited individuals and stakeholders from every walk of life, including women's shelters, and have had conversations with them in that way. And we would forward those conversations at Cabinet where those ministries like Status of Women and Culture would be there. But again, we don't lead on that. That is a ministry line item that would either reside in that ministry or Seniors, Communities and Social Services. But again, while it's an important issue, it is being led by other ministries at this time.
Thank you, Minister. Many Albertans living in older homes face particularly high heating costs. What energy efficiency programs or subsidies is the ministry offering to help these homeowners reduce their utility burdens?
Great question. At this time, we don't have additional other than the Rural Utilities Act, grant, I should say, and some of the supporting natural gas rebate programs. However, we are endeavoring and beginning the work on demand-side management, or DSM, as you would well know, which would empower individuals, no matter where they live or what type of home they would have, to take back more control of their utility bills. As we endeavor, and we've asked several independent, not government agencies related to do additional work. Some of your other members might know the Energy Futures Lab. We've asked them specifically to look at this item and provide recommendations to the government in a nonpartisan way to help establish programs that we could further implement on, particularly related to distribution and demand-side management, as our entire market structure currently doesn't incentivize that for business entities in terms of distribution companies. They would make less money by being more efficient. So obviously that's a disincentive to become efficient. So we've asked them to consider the breakdown of how we could integrate higher levels of efficiency, better levels of personal autonomy from a rate-based perspective, and allow those who make good energy choices, which many seniors often do actually. They choose to wash their clothes or their dishes after peak hours, but there's very little to no benefit on that because it's one price 24 hours a day. So if we can get some of this technology and some of these recommendations implemented, there may be at some point in the future an increased cost either to the taxpayer through our ministry for a funding item for a capital expense like AMI technology or smart meters. There's a number of technological infrastructure advancements we think we could make to significantly benefit Albertans no matter where they live, and reward them with time of use rates that they could then utilize to empower themselves to make choices that actually show up in cost savings on their bills. And or it could be in terms of different rate structures to allow further competition through our private retail base, where these programs are paid for through participation from the community, but in such a way that it rewards good energy choices and allows for virtual power plants. So while we don't have those programs yet, we have begun the work to do the research to be able to incorporate them coming into later this year, likely into the following years.
Thank you, Minister. I will see the remainder of the time to my colleague.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I start, thank you to the public service for all the hard work for creating the budget for us, for Albertans, and for your advice to the minister. So thank you. I'd like to start with objective 2.3 on page 15 of the business plan on streamlining the legislative requirements and regulatory processes to better attract investment and encourage more affordable utilities for Albertans. So the government has started a complicated and endless restructured energy market redesign. It is mentioned in the business plan on page 15. Mr. Chair, when I talk to anybody, literally anyone in the electricity sector right now, there is an immense sense of uncertainty and confusion in our market. It is too much, it's too fast as changed, and the analysts cannot even model all the market features and the bells and the whistles that the government and the ISO keep adding into the market design as they go. So it's clear that this REM process has undermined investors' confidence in the electricity market. Through you, Mr. Chair, how is the minister maintaining competitiveness in the market when he keeps adding so many distortions and so many bespoke features in the market? Sometimes I wonder if we're in the fashion industry.
Thank you for the interesting question, and I do appreciate that. It is ironic, the selective and short-term memories that many of us have at different times in our life. In regards to the restructured electricity market, when we commenced with this, virtually every participant in the market recognized and agreed that we needed to do change. And we have begun that change predominantly to find a way for the market to respond in a free market economy to add reliability to that. Now, while we have led that charge and we've enabled legislation to allow our regulator, the ISO, to do that work, we aren't doing that work directly. And now, including up to the last IPSA conference, the Independent Power Producers Conference that we attended, we heard the two conflicting concerns. You're going too fast and you're going too slow. So we have commenced what in Ontario has taken over 9 years to accomplish, and they still aren't finished. We have talked with Texas, who is also in about year 5 of restructuring their market, and they're still not completely satisfied with how that's working. We've talked to California, who's done a number of iterations, and they're in multi-years of theirs. We are on track to have our final decisions made this summer on our restructured electricity market. And while many of the topics of conversation, I will ask my representative from the ISO here to add to this in terms of investment and other comments. The work that we have done and the work we've asked them to do is inherent in them asking all the questions. Whether we actually land on a certain decision or a certain policy, it is still due diligence to inquire and work through all the possibilities. So while many of the items would be bespoke or novel and new to Alberta, many of these have been implemented in other jurisdictions that most similarly align with Alberta. And one of the greatest challenges is that no other market in all of North America is exactly like Alberta. And that's been a great challenge because we are the only non-publicly owned utility in all of Canada. And there's only one other jurisdiction in the United States, that being Texas, that has a non-public utility. So I'll let you ask another question, but I am prepared to have my ISO come and speak to this as well.
No, I mean, I do agree we needed new reform. There's no question. The question is on the so many things that keep adding every month. Mr. Chair, the minister has oscillated with the introduction of market features like negative pricing and the congestion avoidance market like CAM. The reality is that companies have invested billions in our market without these new proposed features. They invested with a price floor of $0 per megawatt hour. They invested in a market that allows only minimal temporary congestion. But now, with the government signaling that they will add new rules on current investments, they won't have market access for all that energy. So they will be spilling energy and paying for the privilege of supplying low-cost power to consumers. This will change the economic models, the risks and profit margins they had invested in. So, Mr. Chair, it's impossible to invest in a market that's constantly moving. It's been a year of this movement. So through the chair, to the minister, how is the minister protecting existing investments? And what is the government prepared to do to compensate these investors for suddenly changing these rules? I guess, is the government prepared to compensate companies or pay for financial transmission rights? What is the ministry prepared to do to restore the respect and confidence of investors in our jurisdictions right now?
Again, I'll have the ISO director come up and speak to some of that, but the irony is that we have surplus generation now, and we don't have the new market structure. We have had tons of investment coming into Alberta now with no access to market, so it's being managed anyways. All we're seeking to do is find a new and better way to manage it because it's not working. So they made those investment decisions under the current circumstances, and they are facing the same consequences as you've just outlined. What we are trying to do is make sure that going forward we have a better investment signal so that we get a more balanced market and we manage congestion. I'll ask the executive director of the ISO to come and supplement that answer if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself at the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was a legislative intern here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Aaron Engen. I'm the president and CEO of the Alberta Electricity System Operator. And I was going to say it's a great honor to be here, to be able to help enlighten the committee on some of these important issues. I used to be a legislative intern here in 1986 and 1987. I used to be involved in writing the questions and writing the answers. And it's fun to see how this dialogue plays out here. With respect to investor interest, I continue to meet with investors all across the country. As recently as just a few weeks ago, yes, investors are waiting to see how the market design plays out. None of the concepts we're dealing with today are foreign to investors. They are keen to hear what where we land, and they're very troubled by what they see in other jurisdictions. As the ministers talked about, ERCOT in Texas is taking many years to redesign their market. I had conversations with the leadership team in PGM, which is a big market in Northeast U.S., and they're still struggling through issues with respect to their market design to be able to make things work well. In terms of how things are playing out in the marketplace here today, frankly, we're running at light speed to be able to get through a market redesign in about a year and then implement the rules with the speed and pace we're working on here is truly record-breaking in terms of market redesign. The organization, stakeholders, investors, everybody who has an interest in what's going on in the marketplace have the opportunity to be able to speak in front of the ISO in sprint sessions. We had big sessions just last week on congestion. We wanted to call it Shark Week because it was a very challenging time to be able to hear input from everybody, but we're increasingly able to reach consensus with people on how the market design's going forward. I'm also mindful that as we walk through these various alternatives, you talk about everybody in the market, every stakeholder, and that's whether you're a generator or a consumer, has the opportunity to go through the list of objectives, give comments on them, and then what we do is we work to try and find consensus. Sometimes it's a challenge, but ultimately we'll get there. And then also I want to say too that there isn't any, I've often heard people talk about bespoke elements of the Alberta marketplace. There isn't anything that we're doing here in Alberta at this point in time that hasn't been done in some fashion somewhere else in North America. The only way we've been able to do this is we have people working with us that have experience across North America and are able to take principles and put them to work here in the province.
So again, through you, Mr. Chair, I think we are in agreement that none of these features are new. Like the whole world is redesigning their markets, electrification is happening. That's, I think we're in agreement here. The challenge is that it's too many features all at the same time. And when economists cannot model what that means to actually, for investors and to convince their shareholders, that's a problem. That's the point here. Mr. Chair, the minister and the government have signaled that they are introducing legislation to enact redesign. The minister has signaled that the government is okay if the market design is at 75 to 80% of getting it right, so to speak. So through the chair, how does the minister think the markets will respond to this 75 to 80% success rate?
Great. So again, to the too many items is just because we're talking about an item doesn't mean that we've decided to use that. In fact, just today, we sat down with the ISO. There are 6. We're talking about 6 items and deciding on them, and depending on how we end up working with them on that, it might be less than that. And all 6 of those have been introduced and talked about. There are some that we may not proceed with or we may not proceed with at this time. So I think, and I absolutely believe, with many indicators, including a visit to Toronto where we spoke with many global investors, North American investors, some of the largest that we have, that we gave them our time frame, which they thought was reasonable. We gave them the assurance that we would be making these decisions in that time, and then modeling a phantom market in parallel with our current market to allow industry to learn how the new market would operate for a period of time before full implementation. Again, the market has responded very strongly to that. Investors have responded very strongly to that. Given the number of investments that we currently see already in our market and continuing to come to Alberta, we think that once these decisions are finalized and we show the practice map to implementation, that will only increase the number of investments. Right now, there are 2 items that are slowing the amount of investment in Alberta. One is the relative low cost of generation right now. We already have surplus, and without load or additional access to other markets, just natural economics is still slowing some of that investment. And the other is the clean electricity regulations, which has really put a detriment and a dead cliff for natural gas generation of 2035. So we see those things as well as all the instability at a federal level, both in Canada and the US. Those actually are much larger investment in security items than the work that we're doing in our markets, as our ISO executive director just shared.
So there is uncertainty everywhere. Mr. Chair, I would respectfully disagree, and I would add, no respected, credible, and publicly traded company will be putting or willing to put billions of dollars in any market with 75% success rate. So my question is, why wouldn't the minister, through you, Mr. Chair, put the legislation when he's at least 90% confident with this success rate?
Fair enough. So for my speech, I did use the 75-80% rate, which was based on the decisions, not the functioning of the market. And the legislation we're putting forward is enabling legislation so we can continue the work on restructuring the energy market and get to those decisions so we can finalize this time where we have some level of uncertainty because we are making changes. But we are making changes that bring reliability to the market. We're bringing changes that stabilize costs for consumers. And actually, despite what the former NDP government thought when they brought in renewable growth to Alberta at a great rate, which has many positive attributes, The negative attributes is we saw a tremendous increase in transmission and distribution costs. That was the negative flip side that was never talked about. Most Albertans' bills is 60% transmission distribution, and a large portion of that is because we went from a small number of defined coal or natural gas generation sites to well over 200 unique new renewable sites. And with our zero congestion policy, every single one of those transmission costs and upgrading lines, sometimes year after year after year, on a 30-year contract or a 50-year contract, Albertans are paying. And if I could get the ISO director to come back once more, if you could talk about Cluster 1 and Cluster 2 investment and the numbers of megawatts that are in those, I think we can show that investment interest in Alberta is still very strong.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Oh, each time, sorry. Aaron Engen, President and CEO of the Alberta Electric System Operator. So as it stands today, we have two what are called cluster studies. And those are two big groups of generators who want to connect to the grid. And the ISO breaks them into two large groups to be able to analyze how can they connect, what's the impact on the grid, and move them through a process. Currently in our Cluster 1, where projects are well-defined, well through the approval process, we have roughly 5.6 gigawatts, that's 5,600 megawatts of generation. Of that, 1.3 gigawatts is gas-fired generation, and 4.3 gigawatts is wind, solar, and wind and solar backstopped by batteries. So there's, as I say, about 5.6 well advanced. On Cluster 2, which we're just getting underway with, we have 17.5 gigawatts of generation in our connection queue. We have about 4.2 of gas. We have, for the first time, 3.7 gigawatts battery storage on a standalone basis. And the remainder is wind, solar, and some battery along with that as well. So if you roll that up in full context, that's about 23,000 megawatts of generation in our connection queue looking to join and connect to the grid, in the context of currently 23,000 megawatts of generation of capacity that's in operation in Alberta today. And that's against a market where our average load, average consumption is about 10 gigawatts of load.
My biggest indicator is the FID. That's the financial investment determination of a company. That's the biggest indicator. And last year, Alberta saw just one PPA. That's 52 megawatts as well. So that shows that many in the private sector are also waiting to see when will the market design end in order to actually sign PPAs. So there are many indicators. I'm happy to see companies in the queue, but there's also the FIDs and the PPAs as another performance indicator. One last question. I'm looking at the time here, 2 minutes. Through the chair to the minister, what is the one thing that this government could do today to incrementally reduce the investors' uncertainty and to restore some confidence in our market? Just to reduce the confusion, I know you're trying to push the legislation, but what is that incremental change that could restore some confidence and show people that there is light at the end of this design tunnel?
Fair question, and I think we've done that. We did that at IPSA when many people asked, hey, could this be slowed down? Could it be delayed? I said, no, we are prepared, and our government has given full support both at Cabinet and caucus that we will have these final decisions in place by the summer of this year. Again, the legislation that we're bringing forward this spring is not defining legislation, is enabling legislation so that the decisions made by the ISO can be put in place. And I think the very fact that we are continuing to move forward, we are continuing with unprecedented market and stakeholder response and engagement, that we've narrowed our decision points down to 6 or less, that they see a very reasonable path towards conclusion of this summer, that we will have the structure and decisions made for the beginning and development of modeling and additional implementation for a restructured electricity market. Many of the bespoke natures will be reduced produced, and the ISA will have an incredible amount of time to fully explain what each of the decision points are, how they work together, how that helps incumbency. There are decision points that will definitely benefit those who are currently capital in the ground, and define how they are treated differently than new market entrants, but both will have certainty. And we think that the final decisions made by our government on this market, as well as transmission policy, will allow for that certainty to return.
Thank you very much, Minister. That concludes the first portion of the questions from the official opposition. Just before we move to the next from the government side, we will take a break after this 20-minute section. So we will now move to 20 minutes from the government caucus. Member Dick, you're asking a question. Did you want to share time?
I would love to share time with the minister.
Is that okay? Okay, well, I guess we're good. So, again, go ahead. Same rules
Excellent.
apply.
Well, thank you, Minister, for being here on this beautiful Wednesday night, sharing it with us, and thank you for all your staff, your ADMs, your DM, and everybody else in the back as well for being here. It's a great night to talk about electricity, affordability, and utilities. So, thank you for being here. I want to start off with my very favorite conversation from being in Northern Alberta, distribution. So one of the challenges of living in Northern Alberta is that our distribution rates can be significantly higher, 3 to 5 times other locations across the province. There is significant blocks then as well for people living in rural Alberta, in Northern Alberta. It's no longer just a concept of, oh, it's going to cost you a little bit more. It costs you significantly more in Northern Alberta. And when people are moving, that's one of the considerations for people. So we actually have a challenge in Northern Alberta for drawing people in and wanting them to stay. So you have it's key objective 1.4 to keep utilities affordable. So on the distribution, can you just talk about what you're doing on distribution? Maybe how we can maybe make some changes. If there are changes, maybe there aren't changes. But just that discrepancy there, and then I got a couple other questions just on it too as well.
Certainly, and I will point this out. This may be a unique time that this is an issue that's long-standing, and I'm not going to blame the opposition or former NDP government. This is not something that they inherited just like we did. So our electricity system in Alberta has developed over the last 70 years or more. And it came particularly in our rural areas, it came out of a time where electricity was a new luxury, and individuals, farmers, families couldn't get it unless they worked together. In fact, at the time, farmers and ranchers and people who lived in rural and remote Alberta, they asked the government of Alberta if they could help get electricity to their farms, and the government said, no, it's too expensive, we're not going to do it. So what the Alberta Spirit did and Ingenuity did was farmers got together, created the Rural Electrification Associations, the REAs, and they built the lines and wires themselves. And they got that out there. And it's just a tremendous history. I think every Albertan should be proud of that. And that's how one of the elements of conquering the frontier of Alberta was through electrification and the revolution that it actually helped for families to have lights. I don't think many in this generation can actually fathom what it would be like growing up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, often without running water and with no electricity, no lights, no refrigerators, no television, and certainly no cell phones. So this is the development over many years. In the 90s, again, long before the NDP came or our governments came, they deregulated the market. And we began the journey of the current structure that we have now, which broke our electricity market into the 4 elements that I described earlier. Generation, transmission, which is your large towers and wires, the spinal cord of our electricity system in Alberta, if you will, taking power north-south and east-west. Distribution lines are your smaller lines and wires on the side of the road, the poles put in there, distributing electricity to small communities and cities internal to their cities, to ranches and farms and different industry wherever they might be. And then, of course, the last element is retail, and we have a very robust competitive retail market here in Alberta. Over time, that has continued to evolve and change, but one of the elements that has remained constant in the distribution section of that is that the residents of a certain region will pay for the distribution of their region. And if you have a small population and a very large geography, which we do in much of rural Alberta, you pay for hundreds of thousands of kilometers of lines and wires with very few residents, which is why there is a disparity in the distribution costs for those, depending where you live. Transmission is a shared cost because all in Alberta, industry and cities and rural share in that system, so they share an equal rate. On that, generation is also shared. Doesn't matter where the generator is within the province, we blend those costs and we all benefit from the industry and development that we've seen in the province. But distribution is still unshared. And that's why, relatively speaking, cities like Calgary and Edmonton are two major cities with very high populations and relatively small geography pay very low distribution costs. Whereas in the southern region and the northern region, for our 4 major distributors, we have much smaller populations and much larger geographies, realizing that the southern region pays significantly higher than Calgary and Edmonton, but north region pays, to your point, 3 to 5 times as much in distribution. That's where we find ourselves. The solution to that is a challenging one. There are federal Supreme Court rulings that no consumer of a product should have to pay for someone else's benefit of that. And we need to make sure that we have carefully considered arguments saying that all Albertans benefit from different regions in different ways, and sharing costs can benefit all of us in appropriate ways. It's also a factor where an earlier conversation with the members opposite, managing the demand side or the consumer side of the equation affords us actually a tremendous opportunity to benefit all Albertans no matter where they live, and potentially have the greatest amount of impact on those in rural and remote areas where they can benefit most from that new technology. Not all solutions, as in olden days, is our lines and wires. We now have battery storage, we have hydro pump storage, we have geothermal, we have biomass, we have many other new technologies that are constantly evolving, and we have much smarter technology in the management and programming with AI, artificial intelligence capabilities, to help consumers really zoom in on their usage and control their own costs. Empowering Albertans to save on electricity is something I am very excited about the future of in Alberta, because I think it is in tune with that innovative spirit to allow them to do a lot with a little, and I look forward to developing that program later this year.
Thank you for that, Minister. I think it's super incredibly important for all of Northern Alberta. For many of the MLAs sitting at this table, this is a key aspect of affordability, and so thank you for looking at it and trying to make seeing if and how you can make changes there. So now just pushing a little bit more here, Minister. Some of the challenges on transmission and distribution have also been, it seems that the charges have increased in the recent years. So what is your ministry doing to provide relief on these increases? So can you just explain that, maybe explain the increases, and also what you're going to hopefully do about maybe corrections or what your ministry is doing about that?
Certainly. So over the last 20 years or so, there's 2 major factors in the increase in transmission costs. One was a large transmission build-out in the early 2000s that anticipated a huge amount of growth in Alberta, and those costs were extremely large, building for the future. So it was a large infrastructure investment on the province. And then industry, we had several recessions, we had some natural disasters, the floods, and some hailstorms and different things, and the economy took a turn. so we bore costs that we weren't fully utilizing. We paid the full, with the policies that were in place, transmission rates go fully to the ratepayers, so they were paying for all of that, but while not realizing the benefit of that at the time. The second is the rapid growth of renewables in the mid 20-teens, where they came online, and with what I described earlier, going from about 15 constant sites of coal mine or natural gas generation to well over 200 individual unique sites, and attaching all of those to existing transmission, utilized any megawatt space on those wires to fully utilize them, and then some, and added huge amounts of additional transmission and substation step up and step down costs for those unique sites. And that's where in that time frame we saw the inversion. It used to be 60% of the bill was your generation costs, and 40% was transmission, distribution, and rates and riders and fees and taxes. Maybe I should also mention carbon tax in there. That was added significantly, and that was a major increase in taxation at that time. And so into the mid and late 20-teens, we saw transmission and distribution rate riders, fees, and taxes become 60 to 65% of the bill, and generation down to 35%. And once we got through the pandemic and the minister assigned me this portfolio, she asked me, and with support all across industry, all across Alberta, all across stakeholders, they said, there's a lot of problems in our electricity system and these costs are out of control. Who's actually defending the consumer who just has to continue to pay these transmission distribution costs with no one to stand up for them and no one to defend for them, because 100% of that cost was borne by the ratepayers, no matter who decided which projects went ahead or not. And that's when we began the journey to address our transmission regulations, which we've done. And we've done two significant changes, probably a couple more, but two significant ones that I'll mention here. One is we've moved away from zero congestion. Zero congestion means that once a line is full of electricity, that if there's more generation put on at one end or more load on the other, those lines automatically have to be increased in size to carry that, because congestion can cause a lot of challenges in electricity system. It creates heat on the lines, it has to do with their slack, different temperatures, and if they break, then it can cause fires. A live wire hitting wild grasslands or forestry areas can cause fires. So that zero congestion rule, while a very good rule, was having an unintended consequence of constantly increasing the transmission infrastructure and adding costs to the ratepayer. So that was one, and so that's why we've backed away from that to more optimized transmission planning to say, where can we put generation and load to utilize the space that's already on the system and not always have to build more. The second one is cost causation, which rather than just a black and white, ratepayers pay this and load pays nothing, or load pays it all and ratepayers pay nothing, or a 50-50 split, which is very arbitrary, we went to what's called a cost causation principle that says, what's driving this cost? Is it population growth? Because if it's population growth and a community that's growing, it would be right for those ratepayers to pay that cost so that they can get electricity to their houses and their businesses. Is it industry that's growing? Are they building a new factory or plant? Dow Chemical is a large one that our government's had the excitement of introducing, that's going to need a lot of power. That's great, and they're willing to pay for that. They should pay for their cost of transmission to get the power that they need to operate. But if it's not being driven by those things, what else could it be driven by? Well, it has in recent years been driven by developers wanting to build a generation plant somewhere that suits their needs with large transmission costs, knowing that they can build there because it's really good for them, but Albertans have to pay for that. Well, we don't think that's fair. So we think that standing up for Albertans and saying, who caused that cost? Did we need that cost? And if we didn't, quote unquote, need it, and that's not to be decided by government, that we decided by the arm's length regulator, that fine, because we have a free market economy and you want to build there, you can build there, but you're causing this cost, so you can pay for that cost. And if you can have someone else agree that they're willing to share that cost with you, great, then it can be split. But if you don't and you can't, and a municipality or an industry partnership or someone else doesn't want to pay that cost, you can still build there, but you're going to pay the transmission costs as a cost causation principle. And we think that's fair and balanced for Albertans. And it was these transmission regulations were always meant to be what were deemed locational signals. Where do you build? And they weren't working. People were building wherever they chose to anyway. So industry, we worked with industry on this. These are reasonable and fair. And we think will protect consumers on transmission costs to a great degree while still allowing our province to grow and thrive with a more fair distribution of costs for that development and growth.
Thank you for the wholesome answer. I greatly appreciate that. I'm going to switch. It's still about electricity, but I want to talk about data centers. This is an incredible development potential, I think, for Alberta. We've seen a lot of interest in this. I believe on page 11, you have, along with supporting the Ministry of Technology and Innovation, to implement the AI data center strategy. But one of the key things is making sure we have enough power and we have a reliable power grid. Incredibly important as data centers are, suck a lot of power, they suck a lot of juice. So, and that would demand extra electricity too as well. So how are we going to protect the reliability and affordability of our electrical system from being impacted by the growth of AI data centers and that sector?
Yeah, great question. Appreciate that. So one of the objectives that drives our ministry and I believe our government is putting Albertans first. So we think that there's a tremendous opportunity here for Albertans if we do it right. And that's why you'll have heard our Premier and Minister of Tech and Innovations talk about if you want to come and bring a data center industry to Alberta, be prepared to bring your own power, because we don't want you to just plunk down somewhere onto our grid and increase costs to Albertans by increased competition for the generation megawatts that are available. And we think that obviously there's a lot more nuance, there's a lot more behind those statements, which is what our ministry is working very closely with our regulators, the ISO, the AUC, and the MSA, to name a few, as well as the Utility Consumer Advocate, to make sure that we get this planning right. We believe that if we locate these data centers and generation that they bring with them in the right place, they can grow and thrive, and Albertans can benefit. They can help pay for some of the transmission bill that's already existing in our province, thereby lowering the transmission costs for everyone. If they bring their own power in the right way, they can increase reliability if they don't use it all, and they can put some of the extra generation into the grid to provide, again, additional lower cost generation for everyone else, while increasing our industry and potentially spin off industry from the data center and computation skills that they've got. But this does require a certain amount of foresight and thought, because location matters. And there's 5 critical elements, and hopefully I remember them all, otherwise I'm looking to my team to help me out, that are required for each one of these sites. One is access to water. Water is a significant requirement and in limited supply in different regions of our province. So location really matters in terms of that. Connection to transmission. Again, it's somewhat self-defeating if we put it too far away from anywhere and have to build huge amounts of transmission to cover the cost of the generation. That doesn't help. So transmission matters. Fuel source for their generation. Many of these data centers have a desire to see a good balanced mix of wind, solar, storage, and natural gas for reliability. And we think that's great, but they'll still need fuel sources. Not everywhere in the province has equal access to sun or wind or even natural gas. So that's a consideration. And then roadways, just for construction and accessibility, is significant consideration. Probably one of the minor ones, but building roads still are expensive. And the last one, which is a key consideration, which I should have thought of first, given that we're talking about data centers, is access to fiber. Fiber optics, because that's how you transmit and move around the the commodity that they're building with a data center, which is computational skills, computer skills. Not everything's on the cloud. You still need fiber to move some of that around. So those are five pretty significant areas. And along with Ministries of Technology and Innovation and Jobs, Economy and Trade, we've developed a map of Alberta that highlights the nodes that have greater availability to all five of those, or 3 or 4 or 2 or 1 or whatever the case may be, to help inform the locational making decisions for data centers and generators that would work in conjunction for the maximum benefit to their business and to all Albertans.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, I really appreciate those 5 points, Minister. That's excellent. Just for a quick pitch for all those people watching, Grand Prairie area has all 5 of those things. So I think it's a great location. But I do appreciate your work on this. I know it's significant work. It's new work, so it is exciting. And I think you have a big role to diversify our economy through this potentially too as well. So thank you for your work on that. And I think that's our time.
That concludes government members' first block. We will now take a 5-minute break. That gets us back here at 8:39. Thank you. There we go. If I can get everyone to grab their seat and we'll get started here. Okay, good. Okay, we now move to the second round of questions and responses. The speaking rotation going forward will be the same as the first round, starting with the official opposition, followed by members of the government caucus. However, speaking times will now be reduced to 5 minutes for a duration of the meeting. We will begin this rotation with the member of the official opposition, who will have up to 5 minutes for questions and comments, followed by a response from the minister who may speak for up to 5 minutes. After both individuals have had an opportunity to speak once, we will then move to the caucus, the next caucus. If the members want to share time, and I'm going to assume for the purposes of what we're doing here is that's what we're going to do. The total time is 10 minutes, and no one can speak for longer than 5 minutes straight. So please remember the discussions flow through the chair at all times, and you can't cede your time in this area. So if you run out of questions or things to say, then we just move on and you lose that amount of time. So our first questioner on this is Member Hadje. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we're still going shared, I guess. So the rate of last resort that the minister spoke about replaced the regulated rate option on January 1st. However, according to page 39 of the estimates, the ministry is now spending $4 million this year and $5 million in future years to discourage enrollment of the roller program. So my question is that through the chair, why did the ministry set the roller rate so high, almost double the market rate at some occasions? And can the minister confirm whether the most of these ratepayers who are now paying the highest electricity price are low-income Albertans?
Thank you for that. I'll first point out that the government or my ministry did not set the price. It was a negotiated price between the Utility Consumer Advocate and industry stakeholders governed by the Alberta Utility Commission, with the Market Surveillance Administrator monitoring the negotiations to make sure that they were fair and comprehensive. Again, as I said earlier, the ultimate objective was to get a fair and reasonable rate, but not necessarily the lowest rate. It was meant to be a rate that was stable and sustainable for a 2-year period. Prior to this, when it was the regulated rate option, the providers who had to provide the default electricity rate, which this is a default rate, which by definition means that there's no other rate available. The regulated rate option, the name gave the false impression that it was regulated and governed by somebody to make sure that it was within a reasonable rate at all times. It was not. It was a volatile rate that, given the way the market has grown over the last few years, was becoming more and more volatile, as evidenced by the increased, the absolute rate shock that most consumers who were on it felt in August of 2023, where it went up from 22 cents a kilowatt hour in July to 33.1 or 2 cents in August. That's an over 35% increase in 1 month. And given the way that different bills and fees, particularly in Calgary, were enabled, many members who are on it, many consumers who are on it, particularly in Calgary, could have seen their bill triple or quadruple. So the goal of the rate of last resort was, one, to create awareness through the name, and this came from industry. It was industry suggested name, not one that we developed within our ministry, although we had to make the decision on it, but this was one provided. And 2 is that it was stable. So now we've authorized the purchasers of power to buy up to 2 years of power, thereby stabilizing that rate commitment for 2 years. And they can only see a 10% adjustment, except for extreme times in the market that we've created release valves.
Has the ministry made any assessment to see if the 400,000 on estimated numbers predominantly low-income Albertans?
It's constantly changing. So initially, when we began this work and made the change, there was very near 700,000 Albertans on the R roller that transitioned to the rate of last resort. That number is down now to, I think, less than 400,000. Many of those individuals are not low income. They are, in fact, people new to Alberta. Again, as the default rate, when you move somewhere, when you move to Alberta, particularly from any other province in Canada, you would be used to a public utility. I'm getting to that, sorry. I am not meaning to belabor the point. So they need a default rate, because when you move in, you don't have time to get a credit rating review. You don't get a chance to establish that, so you're a newcomer. But you need electricity, because you got to keep your food from rotting in the fridge and freezer, and you need lights and water and pumps and all of those kind of things. So you just get power for one, and you're set on the default rate. Ironically, the rate of last resort's current rate is almost the same as the R roller rate was before, or sort of the rate of last resort was before, 12 cents and change, very, very similar. The analysis now shows that while newcomers are quite a number on that, there are some who are low income, although many individuals in Alberta who are low income have many other programs available to them, including we're aware of at least 3 private retailers who have specific competitive market rates meant for low income Albertans that are better than the R roller. The R roller also has some in rural communities where they have no other competitive rates available to them. So there is a good mix. Some are low income, some are newcomers, and some have no other available rate available to them.
Thank you. Through the chair, geographic areas, especially rural Alberta, where there is no competitive providers, what is the strategy in terms of helping on the affordability side of that?
So again, they were on a fluctuating market rate anyways, and if they were, some of those individuals in rural Alberta are on farms and their electricity usage is significantly higher than those in urban settings. So the volatility, I've talked to some farmers where their standard monthly rate was $50,000 for a monthly bill. And if they're on a volatile rate like the RRO was, and they saw that price shock in August, their rate went from $50,000 to $250,000 in 1 month. And so they appreciate the stability that we've offered, that cannot happen. They have certainty for 2 years now, and they appreciate that the average rate of the RRO, which was just over 12 cents, is virtually the same as the new R roller rate. So if they have no other option, this is still a better option than what it was before. And I will go back to your previous question, just one thing. Reporting to the Utility Consumer Advocate happens whenever somebody's on the R roller. After 90 days, the Utility Consumer Advocate is contacting them and testing with each customer if that is their only option, or if they have a better option, or if they can qualify for some other program, more competitive rate or something else. And Seniors Community Social Services has supports for vulnerable Albertans that the UCA can help direct these individuals to, so they have services provided to them from many areas, helping them out, particularly if they're low income.
So combine this this year, 2025 budget and the subsequent year, the ministry allocated $9 million to discourage people from roller. So do we have some sort of benchmark in terms of how much, like from return of investment perspective, how many Albertans would be removed from roller to the competitive market?
Yeah, so on your first point, there is a rate rider for the Utility Consumer Advocate in the R roller price. It is 1/10 of 1 cent. So it's a very, so if the rate is 12 cents a kilowatt hour, it's 12.1 cents. What's that? So 12.01 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what is self-funding, and that money does not come to government, doesn't go to general revenues, it goes to the Utility Consumer Advocate and their work supporting these consumers. I think we have a chart that shows the percentage decrease on the R roller. So on the default rate in 2020, is this how many people are coming off? So the number of people switching to competitive retail rates, 2020, 54%, 2021, 56%, 2022, 61%, 2023, when we had the price spike, 67%, and now with our continued advocacy in 2024, 75% switching off of the R roller. And that's, we're taking that as a very positive indicator that the information and education that the utility consumer advocate provides is helping inform individuals, and with great success, they're finding alternative, lower cost options available to them.
The remaining 45 seconds, was rebate considerate?
We did a rebate in 2022, and we did consider that. The problem is it's a lot of dollars that doesn't always equally reach consumers. It's very hard to identify the financial situation of a consumer through a meter. And then it's not sustainable because it continues to be a tax-funded situation where information and education will go with those customers wherever they are. And at an extremely low rate of 1/10 of 1 penny, it would make, it doesn't even make a dollar or two difference on an individual's bill.
Thank you. Our question now comes from Member Hunter. Go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and his team. Minister, the changes that were made to the default electricity rate were to help Albertans understand that the rate of last resort is probably not their best option. But Albertans' population is growing, and that means we have a number of newcomers that come to our province from other jurisdictions that do not have our competitive electricity market and understand how it works. So, through the chair to you, Minister, with regards to key objective 1.4 of the ministry's business plan, how are you ensuring that new Albertans understand that the rate of last resort is probably not their best option, and there may be more affordable options out there for them in the 2025-26 year?
Great question. Thank you so much for that. So a number of initiatives that we've undertaken. Some is advertising, which you may have seen online or through television, which is just making people aware that it is different in Alberta than where they may have moved from, whether that's British Columbia or Saskatchewan or Ontario or somewhere else. And they need to know what it is. And part of that was related to the decision to name it the rate of last resort. And then not just providing that information on a commercial, but providing them support through the utility consumer advocate, which is funded through this rate, so that there's people available. So they have a phone number to call. So they have someone to ask, say, what does this mean? What does being on the rate of last resort? I don't like how that sounds. What does that mean for me? I just moved here from Manitoba, and I live in Tabor. So what options are available to me? And the utility consumer advocate has a terrific team. Some of them are in the room today. If they want to wave, that would be great. They're a great part of our government's bureaucratic workforce, and they help inform individuals of the options that they have, the time that they have to move from that, and they become informed on what retail options they have, where they live, what a competitive retail market looks like, and other resources that might be available to them. To the members opposite former question, if you're a low income or can't make a certain credit rating to get retail, competitive retail option, the utility consumer advocate can help direct you to other government of Alberta and ministry supports that can help you pay your bills. And I'm very proud of that, to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. And it's a recurring, every 90 days that somebody's on the rate of last resort, the utility consumer advocate is directed to contact them and make sure they're aware of their choices, and make sure that they're continuing to be informed, and they're not just there. What we saw when we initially took over is many seniors who had been on the RRO for years and years and years had no idea what rate they were on, had no idea what volatility they were in store for, and those were the ones who, they had financial means of some degree, but the change from 1 month to the next on a fixed income, be it large or small, that shock was not sustainable for them. So being able to inform them, and reach out to them and find the rates and the competitive retail options that were best suited to them has been a huge change. So we see a large number of turnover each month of those on the R roller as people move to Alberta, become aware of their options and change off. So in that 2-3 months time frame, we see a lot of that occurring. Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure, I appreciate that. So how many Albertans have moved off the rate of last resort, and how many are expected to move off in 2025-26?
Right. So for background, in 2024, 75% of the residential ratepayers were on a competitive contract compared to 67% of the year prior. So some context to that former question. Currently, there's somewhere just under 400,000 households on the rate of last resort. And this is a decrease of nearly 20,000 individuals since last year. So we are currently running an additional campaign through the Utility Consumer Advocate that has had over 3 million completed views of the videos that we've provided. And radio has had 46 million impressions and 700,000 Utility Consumer Advocate site visits. So we are seeing a tremendous shift, whereas prior to this change, the number on the RRO was very constant between 600 and 700,000 people every year. It was very constant for a very long time. We've seen that number almost cut in half. So we're seeing a large amount of information and people understanding and making different choices, which we think was the objective all along.
Well, with 46 million impressions and only 4.5 million people in Alberta, I hope they got the message.
So do I. And likely there is some interest from other provinces, people considering moving to Alberta. As we know, we've seen a huge income of population, and those family members might be going, a husband might look first and then a wife, or the other way around, or different partners who are thinking of moving in together in whatever that looks like for their family. I'm sure they're checking out Alberta and trying to get an idea of what the cost of living is, not just what a home price is or what rental prices are, but also utility rates. And we think that this initiative has been very helpful for those coming to Alberta.
Sure, I appreciate that, Minister. I know that one of the issues the government had to deal with following the previous government was impacts to the reliability of our power grid, phasing out of coal power too quickly without considering how it would impact how much dispatchable baseload power is available. I was in opposition at the time when the NDP were in, and I watched that whole thing unfold, and now we're seeing the effects of that. So you've spoken about the design of a restructured energy market that will enhance price stability, improve affordability, and ensure reliable supply coordination across various generation types. And this appears to align with the broader objectives outlined in the 2025-28 business plan, especially key objective 1.4 on page 13, focusing on modernizing the electricity grid to ensure its affordability, reliability, and sustainability. So through the chair to you, Minister, can you provide more details on what government is doing to change Alberta's energy market and how these changes will impact Albertans in their everyday lives going into the 25-26 year?
Absolutely. I think one of the first things that we did is realize that there are 4 unique elements to our electricity grid, and each one of those needs to be reviewed and modernized to achieve a concerted cooperative goal of affordability, stability, and sustainability within our system. You can't just fix one thing and expect all the rest to align themselves. It's just not how things work. There was an adjustment from coal, which ended up in $2 billion of costs for Alberta taxpayers to shoulder in the transition away from coal. There was the increased cost because even though natural gas prices were low and are low, it was still twice the cost of coal for generation. So that was passed on to ratepayers. And then as we brought on more and more renewable energy, there was the forgotten element that was increasing costs on transmission. So again, all of these things need to work together, and that's why we began a comprehensive review of the entire system, not just a generation mix, which is important, because even under the former NDP government, they acknowledged that if renewables exceeded 30% of our grid, we would have intermittency and volatility issues. Currently, we're nearly 40% of our generation capacity is renewables. And that is causing major volatility issues and intermittency, which is why we're seeking a more balanced path forward by adding either lines and wires or battery storage or more natural gas dispatchable generation. And all of the above is taking place. So we are balancing our generation. We are modernizing our transmission so that ratepayers aren't just footing the bill for whatever ideas come forward. We have a concerted design of all Alberta. Where are the needs? Where are the growths? With the cost causation principles that I outlined earlier. And we're moving on. We've already done some modernization of our competitive retail to make sure that they're sustainable and can offer a myriad of choices to consumers. And the last piece will be coming this summer, which will be distribution. How do we modernize and optimize that to allow for virtual power plants and time of use rates, demand side management, which I spoke to earlier, empowering Albertans to make good energy choices that result in cost savings to them. Right now they can make many of those choices, but the way our system is set up, it doesn't benefit them. They pay the same electricity at 3 o'clock in the morning that they do at 5 o'clock in the evening, which is typically a peak time for using electricity. So in modernizing our system, we think it's going to benefit Albertans all over. It's going to increase the investability of Alberta because we have a balanced, sustainable market. And we can attract different industry to Alberta, like data centers.
Thank you very much, Minister. Who do we have now? Member Hadji, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 35 of the estimates, we see funding for the Utilities Consumer Advocate increase from 9 million to 13 million. According to page 13 of the business plan, 8.2 million has been allocated to the UCA core programs. So I'm trying to understand, those core programs were to educate Albertans, resolve disputes, and advocate for consumer interests. So how is this program different than the core program of the UCA?
So again, that difference of funding is self-funded through the 1/10 of 1 penny on our roller, and it is all the increased services required by the Utility Consumer Advocate to support the rate of last resort, because we have a 90-day callback, so they need more staffing for that. But I would like to actually go to my Minister of ADM of Finance, if you'd like to talk a little bit about that increase from the 9 million to the 13 million.
Sure, thank you. So the $9.4 million to forecast to $13.1 million equates to $5 million, of course, as the Minister mentioned, and that is entirely related to the roller and the surcharge of 0.01 cents per kilowatt hour. And of course, that is entirely funded through credit recovery means, aka it does not go into general revenue. It goes through the balancing pool to the UCA, where they then deploy that for the programs that he has mentioned.
And if the member would so allow me, I'd like to call forward Chris Hunt from the Utility Consumer Advocate to just share a little bit about the core mandate and the work that they do, as well as the new requirements under the R-Roller, if you're okay with that. If you could just introduce yourself when you get to the mic, Chris.
Thanks, Minister. Chris Hunt, Utilities Consumer Advocate. For the rate of last resort transitional funding that is funded by the Consumer Awareness Surcharge, it's being directed to a number of specific programs. So we've increased staffing for our call center so that when people call in and have questions about the rate of last resort, and we anticipated that based off the advertising campaign, that we're ready for them. And so that staffing's in place right now. As part of the rate of last resort regulation, we're also required to notify rate of last resort customers every 90 days. So as part of that process, we've worked with the rate of last resort providers. We've identified all the customers. We've established a database. It gets updated every 60 days. So we understand exactly who the customers are. Each of those customers receives either a letter or an email that directs them to our mediation team. If they have questions, it directs them to our website and lets them know exactly where they can find out what their retail options are. And then on top of that, we've also upgraded our consumer education programs. So we have a bunch of new resources available so that when customers go looking for information about what is the rate of last resort, what are their other retail options, that it's very easy for them to find that information. So as part of that, we're upgrading our website, and we're upgrading our cost comparison tool over the next 6 months as well.
How many FTEs going to support the program?
So we brought in 8 new FTEs over the last year.
And this is a transitional funding for just 2 years?
At this time. Sorry, at this time, it is just for 2 years in this budget and the next, anticipating potential changes in the number of people on the R-roller and how it continues to work with population fluctuation and growth within the province. But we'll continue to monitor and update it. And that's why we watch, because it's self-funded, as the number of people either grow or shrink on that, the dollars will also grow and shrink comparatively. So that allows, as a very clear indicator to the utility consumer advocate, how to manage their workforce to meet the need that is either there and growing or there and shrinking. And we thought it's a very, very low-cost, affordable way to make sure that individuals new to Alberta or struggling with their utility bills have access to the supports they need.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, last fall, the minister received a new mandate letter assigning the minister responsibility on the legislative, regulatory, and policy development of nuclear energy in Alberta, including implementation. So as part of this initiative, the government funded Canvas through Alberta Innovates to conduct further studies on the application of small modular reactors. Have these studies been completed?
Right, sorry, thank you for a moment there just to confer with my DM. Tech and Innovations is running those studies, and I'm not sure that they are completed at this time. We are actively engaged, and we are leading on the regulatory and legislative framework. We are hoping to begin this year with community and public engagement. We think one of the first critical components of developing a new technology or generation, particularly one like nuclear, which has globally seen some setbacks over the recent decades, that informing the public of different options and the difference between Canadian technology and other technology around the world, where incidents like many of you would know, Chernobyl, or that does not happen, with Canadian technology. It's a different technology. And many Albertans, many Canadians don't actually realize that nuclear has been successfully deployed in Canada for over 60 years, beginning in early 1960 in Ontario, and has been a successful program there ever since. So we want to make sure that we begin with talking to Albertans about what they know, what they understand, what their fears are. Many of the concerns we've already heard from previous engagements is what happens with the waste. We think this is a significant conversation to undertake. I just had a meeting this week with the Canadian Nuclear Waste Organization, which is a private company, but it is set up and required by federal legislation to deal with all radioactive and nuclear waste within Canada. And their work is predominantly for long-term storage, which is deep geological repositories, so DGRs, and they have identified one location in Northern Ontario that they are continuing to work and develop, and they are now beginning their DGR2 review for a second location, probably further west in Canada, but it's still open because Saskatchewan is also pursuing a nuclear program. And this is long-term storage, so currently it's stored above ground, but this is for a minimum of 150 years underground.
Was there any budgeting consideration that was done in budget 2025 as whether it's studies or feasibility exercises that needs to be done?
Good question. We did ask for a $1.6 million engagement funding stream. That was not approved given the other challenges faced by the budget. So we have come back to funding with internal to our department to see if there's other lower cost ways to begin that engagement. Given the fact that the supply chain and technological construction of a nuclear reactor, even if you were to order those parts today, you wouldn't be able to begin construction for at least 8 to 10 years. We think we've got a little bit of time to do that engagement, but we are, because of budget constraints, we're looking at other ways to engage with Albertans. We are hoping to utilize current relationships with rural municipalities and Alberta municipalities for their conventions, which they often have speakers at. That's one avenue. We have worked with Indigenous relations to begin conversations with our First Nations in ways that are already currently funded, and we're seeking other opportunities to engage with Albertans all across Alberta, some online, some virtual, some potentially public surveys. Those decisions have not yet been made, but these are other avenues that are lower cost that we think we could accommodate within the time frame.
Thank you. On page 15 of the Ministry Business Plan, the Minister mentioned, the business plan mentions aligning hydrogen blending with CSA standards, but the specific funding has been allocated to, has there specific funding that has been allocated to this?
For hydrogen? No, not at this time. That's within our ministry's mandate. It's mostly legislative and regulatory. Again, setting up the framework. That commodity would be paid for by the recipients of the benefits of that structure. If you'll indulge me, I will go back to a previous question. You asked about the reports that were being done. I've just been notified that the reports are done, but they are under review by AI and ERA. So those entities are undergoing the final reviews of them before they're made public. So we haven't seen them yet, but they are done.
Thank you very much. We now go to the government side. Member Sear, Member Stefan, go ahead.
That sounds the same at the
Yeah,
start.
I know.
Thank you, Chair. Good to be here. Minister, block or combined time? What's your preference?
I'll go back and forth with you, Member Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Well, let's go into page 13 of the business plan, 1.4, tackling the cost of utility payments. I know we've talked about some good things that we've done to try and improve affordability. I just was kind of curious, actually. I know when I first became an MLA in 2019, and I know that there was costs that Alberta taxpayers were paying because unfortunately the NDP closed down a bunch of coal plants before the end of their economic life. And my question just simply was, are we still paying for that, or did we finally burn through that? Because it was a lot of money, wasn't it?
It is. It was $2 billion in total. We still pay roughly $100 million a year, and we will be paying that until 2030 when those asset requirements and liabilities are retired.
The gift that just keeps on giving, eh? Well, I will say this, you know, from an affordability perspective, tax cut is the absolute best thing that we can do for affordability as a tax lawyer. I love this. You know, Alberta's such a great place, very competitive jurisdiction, but creating that new low first $60,000 low tax bracket and how it saves all Albertans, everyone benefits, but proportionally speaking, those in lower income, if all their income is taxed within that 8% bracket, I just think that's such a wonderful thing for affordability. Doesn't cost anything to administer. No government program costs. I love it. Need more of that. Yeah, super duper. Okay, key objective 2.2 in the ministry business plan refers to ensuring the responsible development of our electric system. And I wanted to ask, of course, I think you've touched on this in terms of making sure that we have the right mix. Now, I know that we had to have a pause because things were going in a bad direction. There was a lack of balance. So, to the minister through the chair, what was the outcome of the generation approvals pause on renewable energy? And what were the learnings from that pause?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. It was a pause that we felt was prudent at the time to make sure that we understood what was motivating developers to build renewables and almost only renewables within the province, and how we could get a better balance for that. At the same time, we also were addressing some long-standing issues from our particularly rural landowners who felt that much of the arable farmland within Alberta was getting covered either by solar panels or some potential negative effects from wind turbines, like vibration, sound, and shadow flicker, as well as the potential cumulative impact to birds and bats across southern Alberta in particular. So it was a good time to review all of those items. There's still more work being put forward, and we wanted to protect, like many jurisdictions, including California, some really important viewscapes for southern Alberta, our eastern slopes and our mountains. Those are majestic pictures, and in some of our department, we were sharing different vacation pictures earlier today, much of which was Alberta and our mountains and snow-covered mountains and rivers. And we want to make sure that tourists from all around the world get the opportunity for generations to come to see those. I will note that one of the learnings came from California, often considered a very progressive part of the United States for renewable energy. They too put a year-long pause on renewables and development. They couldn't even connect to the grid. And they implemented a viewscape moratorium for wind turbines off their beaches. Their continental shelf goes approximately 5 miles. This is US, that's why I'm using miles. 5 miles off the shore. And the continental shelf is needed to anchor those wind turbines. That's how they stay upright and generate electricity. But California decided that to protect their viewscape, you could not build a wind turbine within 20 miles of that shore, which converted is 35 kilometers, which is exactly the same as our viewscape distance to protect our mountains. And that's where that learning came from. So even though they knew in that progressive state that visual protection area of 20 miles, 35 kilometers, meant that they couldn't build wind turbines because there is no continental shelf to provide the foundation for those structures, at least at this time. They thought protecting that viewscape was that important. And we feel the same, where our pride in our mountains is the same. So a number of learnings, a number of areas and significant landmarks within Alberta we want to protect. Some of our parks, national parks and heritage sites, with the exception of where First Nations want to utilize their land for that. So there's learnings out of that, and there is learnings that the cost of transmission is a related cost to renewable development. So that's where a lot of this informed our decisions on our transmission regulations, which I said earlier, were meant as locational signals. And if locational signals don't end up with investment decisions changing or modifying the location where they build, then they're not actually working. And so that's why it informed us to develop additional transmission regulations, which will work. And industry has acknowledged will work on better locations being chosen to protect our beautiful landscapes, to allow for an agricultural first community where agriculture is a primary economic driver in much of our state, while still allowing for renewables investment, but in a much more responsible way that benefits all Albertans, not just some.
Yeah, we have to use it where we have, we don't want to diminish or undermine where we have great competitive advantages. Thank you for that, Minister. So key objective 2.3 talks about attracting investment to Alberta's electricity sector, making sure we have that right balance. And to the Minister through the chair, what are the biggest opportunities you see for investment in the energy sector going into 25-26?
Great question. I think a lot of energy storage, non-lines and wires technology has developed significantly. I think placing storage in the right place and in the right size will enable a lot of what we've already built in Alberta to be far more reliable and far more productive within our grid. Decisions made this year that will have long-lasting impacts will also be our strengthening our interconnectivity to neighboring jurisdictions, our intertie, which is a transmission line connection with Saskatchewan. We have one at 3 of our 4 borders. The one with Saskatchewan is at end of life, so the decision's already been made to increase the capability and size of that while we needed to replace it anyways, to allow it to alleviate some of the congestion in the southeastern region of our province and allow for more reliability. Saskatchewan was a terrific partner during the winter of 2023 when we were worried about reliability issues and blackouts. We've also asked our ISO to do further work with our interconnection with British Columbia and its relation with the intertie to Montana to make sure that we increase. Right now they're functioning at somewhat less than full capacity. I think it's just north of 50%. It can vary, but that's roughly where it's at. So we've asked them to come up with technological and capital investment that will reach roughly 80% ability on those lines. Getting to a full 100% is a much longer, much more costly endeavor. We want to take it in steps, financially prudent steps. And going from roughly 50% up to 80% capacity is a significant step in the right direction to further maximize the ability to relieve congestion and provide what Albertans are already paying for, and maximizing and optimizing that system for them. So these are some of the decisions and initiatives that are beginning this year, but will have lasting effects to the affordability and efficiency of our system, which I think all Albertans will benefit from because they're paying for it anyway, so they might as well see the maximum return for those dollars that they've invested, and we're proud of the ISO for the work that they're doing.
Minister, Member El Junaid, go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I wish the minister would apply the pristine viewscapes policy on coal mining, open pit mining in the beautiful landscapes, the mountains you talked about, as well as the agricultural first in the eastern slopes. But I digress, Mr. Chair. I'm still on objective 2.3 on page 15 of the business plan. It is still on the market and affordability for Albertans. I want to preface by saying running a more complex and bespoke system will also require more administration, more experts, and more software and more resources. And this is obvious when I look at the ISO's 2025 budget on page 22. On the page 11 of the business plan, obviously the ISO is an ABC. The ISO's budget has doubled. It increased by 53% from $51.6 million to $109.3 million. So through the chair, how does the Minister of Affordability plan to keep this market design affordable while it's looking less and less affordable with all the bells and whistles that the government keeps adding into the market design? The software alone is priced at $10 million. So through the chair, how does the Minister of Affordability plan to make the REM affordable for consumers, that is Albertans? The REM is projected to increase costs not only for the ISO, but it will also increase cost for consumers, that is Albertans, of course.
Because decisions haven't been made, a lot of those are very, very speculative opinions. But I will ask if Aaron Engen from the ISO would be willing to speak a little to his budget. Because he's a different consolidated entity, it's difficult for me to speak to their budget, but we can speak to ours. But if, Aaron, if you would come and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the budget and development of the ISO over time and how that serves Albertans.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron Engen, President CEO of the ISO. So our budget is largely personnel. We've been having to add people, wanting to add people in order to be able to do the work that we're doing, not just with respect to the redesign of the market, but also supporting the government that it's doing, the work that it's doing around the transmission regulation. The work is a comprehensive package. I know you used the words bells and whistles. There aren't any bells and whistles here. As the minister talked earlier, there are about 7 key elements, and they're highly intercoordinated or interlinked with each other. In terms of overall cost of the program, we're very diligent about ensuring that we are taking the most cost-efficient way of possible to do this. Among that, one of the things that we're doing is ensuring that the market design matches tools that have been deployed elsewhere across North America. One of the mantras we use is making sure that the rules match the tools to keep the cost down. So when we work with software developers, we're trying to make sure that we're not doing things that are unique, that the tools and the rules that we have here in Alberta have been deployed elsewhere across North America, and it's been an important part of the work that the ministry is doing us in helping us design the market.
I just want to supplement that, if that's okay.
Sure.
The member, thank you for allowing me. One of the things that we've really wanted to see is the potential growth for Alberta. We know we're growing in population. We want to grow with industry. I mentioned it earlier without fully providing the context. Alberta exports, I think 2024 was the first time we were truly a net exporter, and somewhere around $100 million of electricity. We look at British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, and they have for a long time been very large exporters because they have publicly owned utilities. So they invest in their infrastructure and sell the excess electricity to the United States and other regions for a profit and another industry within their province. This is something that I believe is a huge potential for Alberta, given that we already have surplus. And the way that our market has developed is what's based on the zipper curve. I'm sure the members understand the zipper curve. You have high prices, then people invest more generation, then the prices go down, and you attract more industry, then you get up high prices, and then you invest more generation. And it goes back and forth, and they zipper those two impacts. Other provinces have avoided the zipper curve because as a public utility, they proactively invest and pay for generation even though they don't need it, but sell the electricity from that. I would love for us to create a private market base where we create the avenues to other markets to allow that industry to develop and thrive. Much like Texas has since their Winter Storm Uri in 2021, their generation capacity far outstrips their usage of that, and what they are seeing is a tremendous influx of new industry into their state, as well as they've increased their ability to export surplus generation. So this is an opportunity I think that we want to accomplish, which is why I was beginning to talk about interties with the members opposite to you.
Interties, I think we can start by fixing our interties with BC. We know they're complaining about us not fixing our interties since 2007, I believe. So that's something we can start with, because I think exporting is a very good idea to make some money for Alberta. I'm still on the ISO's budget. There is, on page 22, there's an item called Special Project. Mr. Chair, in the footnote on page 22, the special project is identified as Downtown Office Relocation Project. This special project is costing ratepayers $9.3 million. Mr. Chair, the ISO expenses are ultimately recovered from consumers. And, you know, there's only one taxpayer, quoting our conservative friends here. So there is an accountability for the ISO's rising costs here. It will be paid by power consumers, and power consumers are taxpayer Albertans. So through you, Mr. Chair, can the minister explain why the ISO is spending all this taxpayer money to move offices literally across the street? I initially thought it was maybe the heavy machinery and the servers. I'm not talking about bells and whistles. It's the offices here. Frankly, I'm just really surprised that there's a move that cost $9.3 million. I worked in downtown Calgary, I worked in downtown Paris, I worked in downtown Sanaa, 3 different continents. I've never seen a move that cost $9.3 million. Corporate offices.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate your line of inquiry. Again, I have to, because they're a consolidated entity, the Market Surveillance Administrator, the Power Natural Gas Consumers Panel, and the Alberta Electric System Operator are not government reporting entities and have separate corporate reporting procedures. So while you can ask those questions, I appreciate that. It's not actually in any of my documents, so I can't, and we had no influence on any of those decisions, so I can't actually answer that. That's not a government expenditure. All the things you said may be true, but again, it's not before us today, and I don't have authority over that. So I've allowed the ISO director to speak to that once. I don't know if he wants to again. But again, those are not our budget and not within the documents that I have, so I can't comment on them.
It is an ABC, as you have indicated in your initial, through you, Mr. Chair, in the introduction. So I would say it is an ABC, and I would invite the minister and the ministry to look into these expenses. We have only less than 2 minutes here. The ISO commissioned an independent and nonpartisan assessment of the ISO's REM. And I'm quoting the E3 report here presented in the ISO's quantitative analysis of the REM. It is dated November 26, 2024. This is slide 21 on the ISO presenting report findings that wind and solar do not cross the 7.5% weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, hurdle rate. That's apparently commonly used for investment decisions. So in very layman language, Mr. Chair, the government's current market redesign is punitive for renewable energy development. So through you, Mr. Chair, is the minister aware that this E3 expert report that the ISO and the government hired expects wind and solar projects to become uneconomic under the current government's REM draft rules? And given that wind and solar energy are the lowest cost new electricity options available, is the minister surprised that E3 also found that energy costs will be higher under the anti-renewable REM design than under existing market rules? This is seen in E3's report, slides 17, 18, and 20 of the E3 analysis.
Again, I'll just remind the committee that the E3 report is not part of our budget documents. It has nothing to do with our estimates. While I'm very interested to talk about REM, and I can comment on that, is that we've already established that the existing market was fraught with challenges and needed changes. The member herself admitted as much, and that not only is generation costs only one aspect. In terms of renewables, it's the lowest cost aspect of them. Transmission distribution far outweigh that cost, so there needs to be a balance in that consideration.
Very much, Minister. We will now go to Member Sear. Go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you be okay with back and forth, sir?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank you and your ministry and all of your officials here for well, we've been here for, 2.5 hours. You've been doing a great job answering a lot of our questions. One of the things that I believe that's on the top of a lot of the minds in my constituency of Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul, is one of the recent announcements that was done by the federal government, the carbon tax. That one there he said he wrote it down to 0. Now, clearly this is a complex issue in Alberta. I guess, what would our utility consumers be looking at in this? Would they see their natural gas bills suddenly have the carbon tax disappear? And because of the way our electricity is done, it's generated primarily through natural gas. It sounds like that's only from the consumer side, so it's actually not going to change the electricity side, generation side, if you will. So again, some clarity for my constituents, because I think a lot of people are going to say they're going to find all these savings, but it's actually hidden, and they're trying to hide it on us.
Yeah, great question. So depending on the outcome of the federal election, which is very difficult to foresee at this point in time, if we remove the residential or consumer portion of the carbon tax, it is unclear exactly where that line would be defined and whether a natural gas provider would be eligible to that reduction or not. If they were, if you look at your current natural gas bills, carbon tax is quite literally 40% of your bill. It is enormous, and it is the single largest contributing factor to the cost, and in many cases 4 or 5 times the cost of the natural gas itself. So I believe it would be a tremendous win for Albertans if we were able to remove the carbon tax. You are absolutely right. On the electricity side, it is embedded with an industrial producer of electricity. So under the Liberals, as I understand it, it would not make a significant impact on that side. Under the federal Conservatives, I believe there would be a beneficial effect because it would be removed from the generators portion, which would be passed on to the ratepayer. Very difficult to anticipate exactly how that would factor into that pricing because, as you say, it is so embedded and hidden behind the ratepayer's bill. We don't have that at this point, but removing the carbon tax would definitely be a tremendous advantage to Albertans in terms of affordability, and I very much advocate on behalf of Albertans to remove it. Not only that, it's a tax on a tax on a tax where the industrial generators pay for it, then the industrial or commercial consumers pay for it in their grocery stores, and then the consumers of groceries pay for it yet again, not only on their bills, but on the bills of their bills for the food and produce that they purchase there. So it is one of the most punitive taxes that we see in Alberta.
Also, it's my understanding that the legislation still exists, and they're just ramping that down. If you were the minister that was under point of order,
Mr. Chair. So under 23B, speaks to matter other than the question under discussion. I don't see the carbon tax discussed anywhere in the business plan or the fiscal plan or the government estimates. Of course, as we know, Mr. Chair, the industrial emitters program is administered by Environment and Protected Areas. The consumer carbon tax is a federal program. This ministry has nothing to do with the administration of the carbon tax for either electricity provider or electricity consumers or natural gas consumers. I ask that the member drop this line of questioning and move on to something that's actually relevant to the matter that we're here to discuss today.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, this is a point of order. The member is talking about something that is actually a cost, and this is the ministry that is actually dealing with affordability for Albertans. I think that carbon tax is certainly one of those issues. I know that the NDP are not happy about us talking about this because they were the first to introduce that in Canada, which then the Liberals decided that they were going to also do. So I guess what my question is, or actually my point is that this is an affordability question, and I think that in fact, I know that you as the chair have given great latitude to the members opposite throughout the night and throughout this whole estimates process. So I don't think it's a point of order.
Yeah, I would say it's not a point of order given the way we have run the meetings. And yeah, well, it's, you know, even tonight I've given lots of latitude to everyone. And I like doing that because I like people to be able to build context around the question that they ultimately get to that should be relative to the budget questions for the ministers. So if you could get to the point on that, then that would be good.
Well, thank you for that. And you know what? I will agree that I haven't been referencing, and I will give that to the member aside here. So a business plan 1.1. I also key objective 2.1. Those are the two that I'm referencing in this discussion. And I also will say that the opposition also opened up with the carbon tax discussion in some of their questioning as well. So I would say that this does open up this. If they're going to bring that up, I think this is very reasonable for us to be able to do the same. But anyway, what happens here is that when it comes to legislation that has been put forward, and being able to ramp up a piece of legislation at will, it's disingenuous of our federal government to be saying more or less that they put it down to zero and it's all fixed. There'd be more work done if this was in fact implemented by the government of Alberta. Is that your opinion, sir?
So again, 23B, I raise a point of order on speaking to matters other than the question under discussion. Now, I appreciate when I first raised this point of order, the member didn't have the opportunity to finish his question. You gave him latitude. You also gave him the direction that he had to tie it to something that is within the ministry's control. Now, he's grasping at straws here, linking to key objective 1.1 and 2.1 to try to distract from the fact that his question has absolutely nothing to do with what the Affordability and Utilities Ministry does. His question was about federal legislation, which is absolutely not under consideration here, Mr. Chair. So I ask that you rule that this question is out of order and ask the member to ask something that is relevant to the matter that we are discussing here this evening.
Mr. Chair, I believe that you've already answered this question and ruled, and that I'm not sure why the member continues to disregard your ruling on this, but I'm sure that the member would like to be able to get to his questions specifically about the issues at hand.
Yeah, so if you could get to that point quickly and you know, make your point and get to the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member for his concerns. All right, so I guess moving on, one of the things that I would like to discuss is energy storage. This is something that is actually new to my region. One of the things that I've got is the Marguerite Lake Air Compressor Station that they're looking at putting in. And what it is, it's kind of neat on what they're considering doing is compressing air into the ground and using when the rates are or the power rates are low, turning it into the compressed air, then releasing it when the power rates or the power is needed in the system, acting as a natural battery. So I'm seeing, sir, that the industry itself is being quite progressive in everything they're doing, and I believe that that you've been open to a lot of that. So it's good, and I also will say that you sat with that company and gave them advice on the next steps. That's a great leadership role that you had taken for this, sir, and I'm very thankful for my constituency. One of the things too is that you were talking about data center nodes, and I'm going to kind of bounce around a little because I got 50 seconds here. Is that map available for the 5 things?
Yeah, that map, if you go to the Government of Alberta website under the Jobs, Economy and Trade, you can find it. What's that? It's called a site selector tool, and you can access it there, and it is available to all of them. Some of the other agencies like Alberta Innovates and Invest Alberta utilize it as well with their work with incoming industry to make sure that they find the best places for them. So it's a multi-use tool, site selector tool. In terms of compressed air storage, I think this is one of the most fascinating technological advancements within the realm. It is relatively lower cost than some other storage units, and it's also very, very clean. So allowing our market to respond is
Thank you. Member Elginade, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go to page 11 of the business plan, clearly stating that the Alberta Utilities Commission protects the social, economic, and environmental interests of Albertans and ensures the utilities operate fairly and efficiently. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I actually agree. This is great. So through the chair, why did the minister decide to bypass the AUC's oversight to pass the initial rules to implement the restructured energy market? While I do recognize the minister wants to finish the design process, trust me, we all do, and the sector and everybody, but removing the regulatory checks and balances by skipping the AUC oversight is extremely problematic. Backloading just means that prospective investors can't trust the market design until a year after the market is already running. The minister's mandate on page 11 specifically notes that the AUC operates independently of the government to ensure fair and competitive market operations. So what message does bypassing it send to the investors? So through you, Mr. Chair, does the minister fully recognize that skipping the AUC process will introduce significant risks to market confidence and long-term affordability and system reliability? It's yes or no.
Actually, we completely disagree. We think that we will have that process within our full process. We're just deferring it to the end so that all the decisions can be made and they can actually review the entire system, not one that's half decided on. And it won't, therefore, it would also not be subject to stalling by 1 or 2 market participants who just don't want to see it happen. And that's exactly what we've seen happen in other jurisdictions where decisions don't get made, the new market doesn't come in, and these decisions get pushed down the road and linger. That uncertainty lingers for years and years and years, approaching a decade. This way, we can make the responsible decisions that we need to make. We can allow it to come into operation. And then once it's operating and everybody gets to see how it actually operates, then the AUC will open up that opportunity, allowing full access to review the regulations and make sure that checks and balances are brought into play. But it does the exact opposite of what you said. It will increase investor certainty by getting those decisions made early, rather than having a lingering market in half design for up to a decade. So we're very confident in this approach. We actually have a lot of buy-in from our regulators, and we continually seek their advice and expert opinion on this. And we're all in agreement that this is the best path for Alberta to move forward, get the decisions made, allow the new market to operate, and then go through regulatory review where tweaks and checks can be implemented, but having an operational market in the meantime.
Thank you, Minister. Through the chair, can the minister confirm whether the minister has a backup plan if this new market fails?
Because we're planning on running it in parallel with the existing market, I'm working out the kinks and challenges within it along the way. We think will alleviate any chance that it would fail, given the expert advice that the ISO has incorporated into their decision-making and design elements all over North America, from Ontario to California to Texas. We're confident that the new model, while it may have some glitches, potentially even some technological challenges, we absolutely believe that the structure will work, and we'll have a chance to practice with it for almost a year before it's fully implemented. And we can go from there. If you're looking at other jurisdictions that have limped along with unfinished markets like Ontario for nearly a decade, if they can make it work, we think that this process, learning from their mistakes, will put us in a better position.
Thank you. Through the chair, is the minister anticipating that skipping the AUC oversight could open up the province to possible lawsuits from stakeholders, investors, and companies who might challenge the new rules, especially that the new rules will not be tested and validated through the AUC oversight and public hearings before they go online?
They will be tested and reviewed at some point. It's just deferred often. And as to lawsuits or legal challenges, those would exist in any way, shape, or form. What we're actually doing is streamlining that process so that the industry actually gets the benefit of seeing it tested in practice and seeing it operation in real time before those delays could take place, so that we're actually limiting that uncertainty to a much more defined timeline than unending, pending whatever challenges might become. A 30-party review before the implementation through regulations will take place. So we're very confident that we will end up with a very workable market by the time we're through this process.
Third-party review consultants?
Can I ask my DM to speak to that a little bit, just to round out the conversation?
Yeah, one of the things, thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we're looking at is making sure before we implement the regulations themselves, that we actually get a third-party set of experts who are going to have a look at this, appreciating that the AUC will also have an opportunity over time. That third-party review will give more confidence as we implement those regulations.
Okay, thank you. We've heard in the legislature and in the Premier's Sovereignty Act motion that the Premier wants to launch a Crown Power company to pick and choose, favorite energy types. What is the minister's backup plan if this goes forward?
Crown Corporation is actually the government's backup plan, so we don't have yet a backup plan to the backup plan. None in industry want to proceed to a Crown Corporation in Alberta. We're very proud of our independent and private market, and we're doing everything to retain that. If we continue to have a federal government that is hostile to Alberta's interests and continue to seek to interfere in our provincially, constitutionally protected jurisdiction, which is our electricity market, and they threaten, like they have under previous iterations of the clean electricity regulations, that they will put people in jail, we can't subject our private industry members to that kind of treatment. That would absolutely stop investment. Who would invest in any province if they're worried about their investment either going bankrupt, being closed down, or that they would be threatened with jail time? That would be the only measure that our government would proceed with a Crown Corporation in order to protect those industry participants who are already here and operating.
Well, thank you, Minister. Just to wrap up this section, I just want to make sure this is in the record, Mr. Chair. The ISO's job is to ensure our system is reliable. The AUC's job is to protect the public interest, to validate, to test this market with experts, and to ensure due process is taken and it's fair and in ratepayers' interest, as mentioned on page 11 of the business plan. I have like 3 minutes here, and we have time to maybe talk again about data centers. As the member from Grand Prairie has started, and I want to start by saying, if you're in the data centers business, you are in the power and energy business. And I do like the ambition of bringing data centers, and it needs a full-on strategy. I guess my question here, there was the project, we have right now 12 gigawatts in the queue just for data centers. So through you, Mr. Chair, why is the minister not stepping up to secure all types of energy to secure data centers? There is the Amazons and Googles, of course, will secure, let's say, natural gas for starters. They will offset emissions with power purchase agreements outside of Alberta. Or more likely, they will just use data centers outside Alberta themselves, where they can access non-emitting power. So we might miss on these investments. So I'm curious, through you, through the chair, why wouldn't the minister capture all these investments? We can provide natural gas, we can provide renewables, we have it all.
Again, we don't have a public utility. That's not our job to capture these. We have a private market, and we have created a concierge service through the Ministry of Technology and Innovation, connecting data centers and these entities with generators as well as the site selector roadmap. We have done all that we can do. We continue to develop a robust strategy to make sure that we identify what type of data center they are, because they can really vary from a 5 megawatt Bitcoin mining operation up to a several gigawatt hyperscaler and everything in between. So do you have exactly the same rules for all of them, or do you identify their individual unique attributes and give them a channel to provide them? The other thing that we're working on is, previous to this, we had a first come, first served kind of policy within Alberta. I don't think that serves Alberta's best interests in this case. How do we identify what rules, what matrix, decision-making matrix do we need to say which are the best fit for Alberta? How many small scalers should we have? How many hyperscalers should we have? Where should they identify? And the work that we're doing in complete and absolute cooperation with our regulators. We are absolutely responding to the request from our AUC, the ISO and the MSA, to enable them to do their jobs. Much of what we're doing, if not all of what we're doing, is at their request. So we're very proud of our regulators and making sure that they can do the absolute best job serving Albertans.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the government side. Member Dick, go ahead. You have 8 minutes left.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again. Just a quick shout out to my wife for just coming here. Thanks very much for coming to watch this exciting night. You're just a legend. So I appreciate that. Legends. Good old sweet cheeks. All right. I do have a question pertaining. I do have a question pertaining. Key objective 1.4 says you're tackling the cost of utility payments for Albertans by identifying policy changes and opportunities to reduce utility costs for Alberta consumers. Here's my question. Liberal leader Carbon Tax Carney promised to remove the carbon tax. When can we expect to see the carbon tax off our bills?
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I was tempted to call a point of order when the member started talking about irrelevant things by mentioning his wife in the audience. But because I'm such a nice person, I declined. However, he's testing my patience. So under 23B, speaking to relevance, of course, Mr. Chair, we know that we've litigated this already. We know that the carbon tax has been ruled out of order. I hear Member Sear arguing with me that it hasn't been ruled out of order. He seems to have forgotten that, in fact, it was his very question that was ruled out of order. Again, we have another question regarding the carbon tax, which is not in the business plan, it's not in the fiscal plan, it's not in the government estimates for affordability and utilities. This is not pertinent to the matter that is before us this evening. I ask that the chair find this a point of order, that the member drop his question, and that we move on to something that is relevant.
Go ahead.
Once again, I find it interesting that the member who was part of the government that actually brought in the first carbon tax in Canada is arguing this. I know that he's concerned about this because all of the Liberal candidates decided that they didn't like the carbon tax. It's now no longer a popular thing in Canada. So I can see why they would be a little concerned about us talking about it. However, I would say, Mr. Chair, that out of all the questions I think that were asked tonight, to the Minister of Affordability, the carbon tax being one of the worst issues that we're dealing with when it comes to cost overruns to families, I'd say this is probably the most pertinent question that could be asked, and probably the one that would most Albertans would want to know the answer to this. So I think that this isn't a point of order, and that this should be ruled in order.
Okay, I'm going to rule it in order, but get to the budget and make sure that we get the last 5 minutes of this thing done.
All right, all right. Well, Minister, would you answer my question, I guess?
Well, yeah, obviously, removing the carbon tax is one of our primary objectives of government. We've stood up for Albertans ever since being elected to make sure that Albertans have the lowest cost capable to them. And it is frustrating when we do everything we can to reduce taxes and fees and costs to Albertans, and the federal government continues to layer in and see increases to a punitive tax like the carbon tax.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much, Minister, for that answer, and I appreciate the chair just for the opportunity. On page 15 of the business plan, under initiatives supporting key objectives, the ministry is collaborating with Indigenous relations to identify Indigenous communities not connected to the electric and gas systems and provide recommendations to expedite connections to utility services. Can you give us some insight into this collaboration process and share with us some insights into the challenges of ensuring these communities are connecting going into 2025, 2026?
Thank you. I think this is a very important question. Obviously, we're very proud of our First Nations and the spirit in which they also exude things that we have value here in Alberta. And they have sought for energy independence and economic independence for a long time. Many of their First Nations that don't have natural gas, don't have connectivity, is I didn't know this till I took this role, is that because they're in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, the ground is extremely rocky, and we haven't been able to trench or dig natural gas pipelines to their communities. It's very, very costly, and yet without natural gas, they don't have that energy independence. Without energy independence, they don't have economic independence because they can't develop their industry. So I'm very proud to stand alongside my colleagues, particularly the Minister of Indigenous Relations, as we seek to find real solutions for these communities. And of course, because of their deep connection to the land, many of them want to utilize more renewable generation, wind and solar, and yet they also recognize that they need the dispatchable nature of natural gas as backup. Many of them work, right now they work off oil, which has to get trucked in over long distances, is very expensive, and obviously very high emitting. They don't feel that reflects the values and connection to the land that they would like to have. So this is one of the most rewarding aspects of this ministry, is to be able to work to see that independence come to them through initiatives that are so meaningful. This isn't just changing the course of one family or two families, but literally an entire First Nation, and for generations. Once we've done that work to build a pipeline through rocky ground and make sure that it gets there in a safe and effective manner, and they have that dedicated commitment of supply, then they can create electricity. Once they can create that electricity, again, as much renewable as possible with some storage, but with natural gas dispatchable for those very, very cold winters or very, very hot summers where their load or their demand would outstrip their capacity of renewables. just watch them thrive. They're so community oriented. They're so economically oriented that once they have these levers at their disposal, their natural innovation, their spirit to be entrepreneurial just comes to life. And to see whole communities, entire communities, fortunes literally change with the connection to natural gas is extremely, extremely exciting. There's some of the ones that are also talking about the future of hydrogen, where they can again take natural gas as an input gas, see it become cleaner, so they again lessen their emissions, so that they get further in touch with their values of a clean and pure earth and land and sky. The opportunities and potential are truly limitless, and I look forward to being able to enable that. I know all of my colleagues in caucus and cabinet also want to see that it's not just a hand out, it's a hand up. And this is true economic reconciliation, something our government has taken a leadership stance in across Canada with our Alberta Indigenous Corporations Fund. So we're providing them the funding to invest in the natural gas, to work with our private industry to supply it, and the whole circle is complete that all Albertans can feel connected.
Thank you very much, Minister. Apologize for the interruption, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for considerations, measures, estimates has concluded. This concludes consideration of the 25-26 main estimates by the Standing Committee on Resource Stewardship. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.